Chapter 226. Gu tidied up the bed and saw that Han Yunxi was enjoying her meal. He did not question her further and just sat by the side to watch her eat. In the cold darkness, a man dressed in red with a devilish face appeared. He looked like a demon, noble and mysterious. His long and narrow eyes were slightly narrowed as he admired the prey in front of him. The more he looked, the more he liked her and the more satisfied he was. His smile grew wider and wider. Clearly, Han Yunxi was the one who was full, but he was the one who was satisfied. Han Yunxi was full. She turned back and could not help but roll her eyes. Did she look that good when she was eating? This was not the first time Gu had been mesmerized by her. "I'm full. You can leave." She was very heartless as she drank the water. No matter how heartless she was, Gu was never angry. He muttered to himself, "Poison girl, if you like someone, do you feel full when you look at her?" Pfft. Han Yunxi immediately spat. What kind of lousy analogy was that? Did he think that she was a man-eating fox demon? "If you don't leave now, the prison guards will come to patrol," she kindly reminded him. Gu Qishao reined in his thoughts and said seriously, "You still haven't answered my question." Han Yunxi did not use the saying, "One has to be blinded by gifts." She asked self-righteously, "You haven't answered my question either. Why are you asking so many questions? How do you know so much about the Tang sect? Why? Is this very important to you?" The last time in the Han family courtyard, Gu had revealed a lot of information in a moment of impulse. Han Yunxi remembered all of it. Long Fei Yi had said that he had misunderstood. Could it be that this guy was looking for Long Fei Yi's secret? Han Yunxi had a feeling that there was a big secret here. Of course, even if she was in prison, she would not betray Long Fei Yi. This was a matter of her integrity. Gu raised his eyebrows and glanced at her. He leaned over and smiled meaningfully. "Poison girl, if you follow me in the future, I'll tell you everything. How about that? With you?" Han Yunxi really didn't understand what this word meant. "Be my woman," Gu blurted out. Han Yunxi was stunned for a moment before she chuckled. "This joke isn't funny at all." Gu wanted to say more, but Han Yunxi mimicked him and smiled innocently. "If you don't leave now, I'll call for help." She was always like this when they were talking about the most important things. Gu took a deep breath, but he still left immediately. It was not that he was easily frightened, but Han Yunxi really knew how to scream. He had personally experienced it several times. After leaving the cell, Gu did not leave. He landed on the roof and lay down with his arms behind his head. He thought that it was not a good idea to continue asking. He had to think of a way to test this woman. But that would have to wait until she got out of the prison. In his opinion, the crisis had basically been resolved with Luo Zuishan's arrival, but who knew that things were far from as simple as he'd imagined. The Supreme Court accepted Luo Zuishan's complaint that very night, but they didn't immediately start the trial. Luo Zuishan had to wait for news. Since ancient times, dealing with the government required procedures, and there was room for manipulation in the procedures. There was a university that asked about it. Luo Zuishan went to the Supreme Court the next day, but unfortunately, he was still dismissed with a "case has been accepted and is going through the process." In the palace, Director Shi was seizing the time to treat the Crown Prince, Long Tianmo. Although Director Shi had a card up his sleeve, if he could cure the Crown Prince and then face Luo Zuishan, it would save him a lot of trouble. He wasn't afraid of the Medical Academy's elders' investigation. On the contrary, he was afraid of Luo Zuishan. Luo Zuishan was the best at nitpicking and pestering. If there was even the slightest dispute over the details, there would be no possibility of the case ending. Thus, he had to wake up the Crown Prince before the trial began and destroy all evidence. Then there wouldn't even be an egg left, and Luo Zuishan wouldn't be able to nitpick. It's not easy to find Luo Zuishan, is it? Who has the skills? Emperor Tianhui was surprised as well. It had taken him a lot of effort to find Shi Yuba, but in just a few short days, someone had managed to find Luo Zuishan. At the very least, this person had some connections with the medical academy. Emperor Tianhui's first suspect was Long Fei, followed by the Han clan, who had connections with the medical academy and knew of the crown prince's misdiagnosis. Han Kongan used to be a director of the medical academy, so the Han clan naturally had connections to the medical academy. But Han Kongan had already been removed from the list, so the possibility wasn't high. As for Long Fei Yi, although he'd never heard of him having connections with the medical academy, Emperor Tianhui felt that he was the only one with such skills in the capital. This fellow had abandoned the rook to save the king. Could it be, on the 6th day, Emperor Tianhui came to his senses, but it was already too late. After Luo Zuishan was dismissed by a minor official from the justice courts a second time, his irritable temper flared up. He actually took out the command token from the medical academy and questioned Shi Yuba's diagnosis in the name of the Council of Elders. No matter whether the patient was the son of heaven or the crown prince, he demanded that Shi Yuba bring along the patient and all relevant information and personnel to the medical academy for a public consultation. Shi Yuba was so stunned by the news that it took him a while to recover. A command token from the Council of Elders. How is that possible? He couldn't believe it. Luo Zuishan's appearance in such a short time was already surprising enough, but he'd even brought a command token with him. The command token was the symbol of the Council of Elders. How did Luo Zuishan get his hands on it? Why would the Council of Elders believe his one-sided words and give him the command token so easily? After all, the Council of Elders had only given the command token to 2 directors in the history of the medical academy. One was Third Elder, who'd already joined the Council of Elders, while the other was Gu Beiyue's grandfather. Leaving aside how Luo Zuishan had gained the Council of Elders' trust, he'd been living in seclusion in a border city of Northernly. For days was already very fast for him to reach Tianning's capital city, so how did he get the command token from the medical academy? If possible, Shi Yuba would definitely suspect that Luo Zuishan's command token was fake. But Luo Zuishan didn't have the guts to do so. No matter how Shi Yuba thought about it, he couldn't help but feel that there was something fishy going on. In the midst of his shock, Emperor Tianhui came to find him. He'd always respected Shi Yuba, but this was the first time he'd questioned him so rudely. What's up with the Council of Elders command token? Did the Council of Elders question your diagnosis? Your Majesty, there's something fishy about this matter. The person who invited Luo Zuishan here can't be simple. Shi Yuba was still relatively calm. Zhen only wants you to treat the crown prince immediately and close the case. Emperor Tianhui said angrily. Shi Yuba could only shake his head. Your Majesty, we agreed on 10 days. Emperor Tianhui's eyes flashed with shrewd light before he said coldly, then Jin will protect you for another 4 days. But in the end, Shi Yuba tactfully refused. Your Majesty, you know what the Council of Elders command token is. According to Tianning's laws, Luo Zuishan couldn't do anything to Shi Yuba, but the rules of the medical academy meant that Shi Yuba had no choice but to comply. Even a 6th-rank primogenitor doctor like him didn't dare to disobey or neglect an Council of Elders command token. Now that Luo Zuishan had brought out the command token, Shi Yuba had no choice but to comply despite his unwillingness. He brought the patient, all relevant information, and personnel with him to the medical academy. Otherwise, he'd never be able to survive in Cloud Realm Continent's medical community again. Emperor Tianhui finally revealed a sinister expression. Shi Yuba, do you think you can take away the Crown Prince and Jin's 2 most wanted criminals? Shi Yuba knew that Emperor Tianhui wouldn't agree, but things had already developed to this point. He had no choice but to brace himself and keep going. Moreover, he was very confident in his own medical skills. "Your Majesty, this one once promised that only I could treat the Crown Prince's illness. Even the Council of Elders wouldn't dare to question me. Now they're only asking for a consultation, so why do we have to throw ourselves into confusion?" Emperor Tianhui coldly looked at him without a word. Shi Yuba added, "If your Majesty doesn't allow this one to take away His Highness Crown Prince, then this one can only use the patient's family as an excuse to refuse the consultation. But once I refuse, this one's diagnosis will be deemed invalid by the medical community as well." If Shi Yuba's diagnosis was invalid, then Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue's crimes would be impossible to convict. Emperor Tianhui finally realized that he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Chapter 227. Rather than saying that Emperor Tianhui was stuck between a rock and a hard place, it was more accurate to say that he was riding a tiger and couldn't dismount. Luo Zuishan had already taken out the Council of Elders command token. Even if the justice courts wanted to open a trial for the Crown Prince's misdiagnosis, Luo Zuishan's personality would never agree. Emperor Tianhui looked gloomily at the Crown Prince on the bed. After some thought, he finally decided to agree to Shi Yuba's request to take the Crown Prince and Han Yunxi away. He didn't want to offend Medicine City's Council of Elders because of this. Of course, he had a condition: he wanted Qin Wangrong to accompany him. He wanted Qin Wangrong to travel with him so he could keep an eye on Long Fei. Emperor Tianhui couldn't tolerate Long Fei having any connections with Medicine City. But Luo Zuishan and Qin Wangrong were about to set out, but Long Fei still hadn't shown up, nor did he express any opinions on the matter. Did his silence mean he agreed with Emperor Tianhui's decision? Who had invited Luo Zuishan was a mystery, as was Long Fei's position. While Emperor Tianhui was pondering the matter, the various factions in the court were doing the same. Han Yunxi was currently being led out by the prison guards. She was filled with doubts as well, but she was trying to figure out Gu's origins. A few days ago, Gu had patted his chest to guarantee that she'd be released. She assumed that he'd break her out of prison, but he actually had the skills to invite Luo Zuishan over. Did he have a personal relationship with Luo Zuishan? Or was it related to Medical City's Council of Elders? Han Yunxi had investigated Medical City specifically for the sake of investigating Lady Tianqin. She had some understanding of the Council of Elders and the Council of Elders, so she naturally knew of Luo Zuishan as well. At the gates, Han Yunxi ran into Gu Beiyue, who'd been escorted out as well. The two of them smiled at each other before walking together. "Esteemed Wang Fei, was it His Highness who invited Director Luo?" Gu Beiyue probed in a low voice. Han Yunxi only smiled and retorted, "You were there when I visited the prison that day. Do you think that's possible?" "Esteemed Wang Fei, to be able to invite Director Luo in such a short time, it's not simple." Gu Beiyue lowered his voice even more. In truth, as long as enough time passed and the news reached Luo Zuishan's ears, with Luo Zuishan's hostile relationship with Shi Yuba, Luo Zuishan would appear even without an invitation. However, the news couldn't have spread so quickly in such a short period of time. Therefore, there were only two possibilities for Luo Zuishan to appear. One was that someone had found Luo Zuishan through the Council of Elders, and the other was that someone had a personal relationship with Luo Zuishan and had directly found him. Han Yunxi hesitated for a moment and didn't say anything. She just shrugged and said, "I find it strange too." Gu Qishao was a man who feared neither heaven nor earth. He'd never told her to keep a secret, but she still kept an eye out for him. As soon as they left the Supreme Court, they saw two groups of people. On one side was Luo Zuishan, and on the other was Qin Wangrong and Shi Yuba. Luo Zuishan drove a large carriage himself, and the medicine boy drove another. On Qin Wangrong's side, there was a large carriage and two prison carriages. As soon as he saw Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue come out, Qin Wangrong arrogantly ordered, "Come, take them to the prison carriages." Gu Beiyue was very calm, but Han Yunxi didn't obey. She had always yearned to go to Medical City. How could she sit in a prison carriage when it was her first time going there? Why should they sit in a prison carriage? Whether they were guilty or not was still undetermined. Han Yunxi was about to speak when an arrogant voice suddenly sounded, "Wait." Following the voice, she saw that the one who spoke was Luo Zuishan. His chin was raised high, and his goatee was sticking up as he spoke. He looked at everyone with disdain. He was so old, but he was even more arrogant than a young person. "Director Luo, is there anything else?" Qin Wangrong was still very polite. Unexpectedly, Luo Zuishan didn't even give face to Qin Wangrong. Stroking his goatee, his attitude was arrogant as he casually said, "Everything related to this case must be personally brought to the medical academy by this old man." Crown Prince, Qin Wangfei, Imperial Physician Gu. Before he could finish, Qin Wangrong couldn't take it anymore and said angrily, "That doesn't make sense." Leaving aside the Crown Prince, even Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue need your lordship's personal escort. They're Tianning's prisoners. Although Emperor Tianhui didn't want to offend Medical City, Qin Wangrong couldn't tolerate a trifling director reaching for a yard after getting an inch. He was used to being respected by others, but this was his first time meeting such an arrogant and rude fellow. "Prisoners." Luo Zuishan arched an eyebrow at Qin Wangrong, a mocking smile on his lips. He didn't try to explain himself, but asked the man beside Qin Wangrong, "Shi Yuba, according to Medical City's rules, what do you think should be done?" Qin Wangrong found Luo Zuishan's mocking words especially glaring. He didn't care about Medical City's rules at all. His attitude was unyielding. "Someone come, what are you spacing out for? Take them all to the prison wagons, immediately." The jailers were about to take them in, but Luo Zuishan wasn't in a rush. Cold, he threatened, "Shi Yuba, do as you see fit." Shi Yuba's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. Despite his reluctance, he endured it and acted like a peacemaker as he walked between Luo Zuishan and Qin Wangrong with a chuckle. "Director Luo, the journey to Medical City is very long. We'll have to rely on Tianning's guards to protect us. Everyone's going the same way, so why be so serious?" Luo Zuishan put on a fake smile. "Director Shi, if you think there's no difference between the prison wagons and horse carriages, then you and Qin Wangrong can sit in them." At these words, not only did Shi Yuba's face turn black, but Qin Wangrong himself felt unwell. On the sidelines, Han Yunxi almost laughed out loud. Luo Zuishan was clearly shielding her and Gu Beiyue. He might be a bit arrogant, but he was also a wonderful and amusing person. "Director Luo, your lordship won't bicker with you for the sake of the Council of Elders. You're already so old, don't." Seeing that Qin Wangrong was about to lose his temper, Shi Yuba forced himself to stop him. After all, he'd experienced Luo Zuishan's temper many times before. This time, he was quite confident in his own medical skills, so he'd let Luo Zuishan show off for a few more days. Long Tianma's illness was something that even the Council of Elders had no hope of curing, much less Luo Zuishan. This time, he not only wanted to earn merits in front of Emperor Tianhui, but also whittle away at Luo Zuishan's arrogance in front of the Council of Elders. Qin Wangrong, Director Luo was only joking. You mustn't take it to heart. Since Medical City has its rules, then everything will be done according to them. As Shi Yuba spoke, he gave Qin Wangrong a meaningful look. Qin Wangrong wasn't willing to compromise, but in the end he didn't say a word. Instead, he angrily flicked his sleeves and climbed into the carriage. Luo Zuishan had already gained the upper hand in their first meeting. He didn't stop while he was ahead, but arrogantly ordered Shi Yuba to bring over the Crown Prince's carriage and have his own medical attendant drive it. If Luo Zuishan was a flamboyant peacock, then Shi Yuba was a shrewd and calculating old fox. Seeing Shi Yuba's yielding attitude, Han Yunxi began to worry. You two, why aren't you coming over yet? At this moment, Luo Zuishan finally looked straight at her and Gu Beiyue. Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue quickly walked down the steps. Junior Gu Beiyue greets Senior Luo. Junior Han Yunxi has long heard of Director Luo's great name. Many thanks to Senior for saving us. Gu Beiyue was cultured and refined, while Han Yunxi was modest and courteous. But who would have thought that Luo Zuishan would glance at Han Yunxi and coldly snort, saving trash like you? Don't think too highly of yourself. Old man was only acting according to the rules. Han Yunxi's smile suddenly froze on her face. Fine, everything this old man did was purely to disgust Shi Yuba. Sure enough, she was overthinking things. Luo Zuishan seriously sized up Gu Beiyue. Gu Yuandong's grandson. Gu Beiyue quickly replied, that's this junior. When grandfather was alive, he often mentioned Senior Luo, but before he could finish speaking, Luo Zuishan coldly snorted and interrupted, your grandfather's medical skills are average. I think you're just a so-so. Gu Beiyue, who had the best temper, also froze. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. You drive the carriage. Follow the carriage in front. Luo Zuishan threw down these words and boarded the carriage, leaving Gu Beiyue and Han Yunxi looking at each other in dismay. Soon, Luo Zuishan impatiently urged, what are you standing around for? If you don't want to take the carriage, then run. This old man wasn't cute at all. Gu Beiyue obediently drove the carriage. Han Yunxi hesitated and inadvertently glanced around. She saw that the surroundings were empty and there was no familiar figure. Well, in this situation, Long Fei Yi not showing up was the wisest choice. Han Yunxi lifted the corner of her skirt and decisively boarded the carriage. She didn't enter the carriage, but sat beside Gu Beiyue. The medical assistant drove the carriage in front to lead the way, while Qin Wangrong and Shi Yuba followed behind them. The group left the justice courts and traveled further and further away. At this moment, a figure gradually grew clearer on the rooftops of the justice courts. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his figure tall and slender. His inky black hair fluttered in the wind. He stood loftily in the shadows, his cold eyes glinting with a cold light. He was like a king looking down on the world. Soon enough, Chu Shifeng arrived and murmured, Your Highness, Wang Gong's found out. It really is someone surnamed Gu, but it's Gu, not Gu Beiyue. Gu? Long Fei Yi was surprised. He always knew that Gu had significant origins, but never expected him to be involved with Medical City. Of Cloud Realm continents 4 cities, Medical City, Medicine City, Carefree City, and the City of Daughters, Medical City was the most powerful and the most difficult to deal with. Leaving aside Emperor Tianhui, even Long Fei Yi didn't want to offend Medical City lightly. What was the relationship between Gu and Medical City? Why did that fellow want to investigate Han Yunxi's background? When Long Fei Yi saw that the carriage was about to disappear, he silently chased after them without a word. It would take at least 10 days to reach Medical City. 5 or 6 days had already passed, but Luo Zuishan hadn't said a word to Han Yunxi or Gu Beiyue. No matter how much this old man despised them, he should at least ask about the Crown Prince's illness, right? After all, Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue were the clearest on the matter. That afternoon, Han Yunxi went to sit in the carriage of her own accord. She saw old man Luo sitting in the main seat with his arms crossed. Although his shrewd little eyes were closed, his expression was still stingy and unkind. This old man was so arrogant. Did he already have full confidence in dealing with Shi Yuba? Did he know that Long Tianma's previous illness was a fetus in the womb? Shi Yuba was so calm in the face of the Council of Elders consultation. This old man seemed to have a card up his sleeve. Han Yunxi didn't know whether to worry or set her mind at ease. She glanced at Luo Zuishan before probing, "Senior Luo." Chapter 228. Senior Luo. Han Yunxi was about to speak, but she retracted her words as soon as they left her mouth. She sighed softly and looked out the window. Things have already gotten to this point, she thought. Asking this old man is pointless. If I want to know everything, I might as well ask Gu. Who knows if he'll come along. Luo Zuishan had been treating Han Yunxi like air, but when he saw her stop in the middle of her question, he couldn't help but give Han Yunxi a few more looks. He assumed that Han Yunxi would speak again, but she simply walked out of the room, leaving Luo Zuishan feeling a little disappointed. After some hesitation, he opened his mouth of his own accord and said in a low voice, "Lass, if you had something to say, you might as well have said it directly." Hearing this, both Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue gave a start. Even the arrogant old man had times when he took the initiative. Han Yunxi gave Gu Beiyue a secret grin before diving into the carriage. She got straight to the point and said, "Regarding the Crown Prince's illness, this junior has a few things I don't understand and would like to ask senior for guidance." Unexpectedly, Luo Zuishan refused without a second thought. Before the consultation, old man won't discuss his illness with anyone, including you too. Han Yunxi couldn't help but want to roll her eyes. We're in the same boat now, all right. Would I tell Shi Yuba about this? Senior Luo, this junior won't ask anything. I just want to confirm one thing, whether my previous diagnosis was right or wrong, Han Yunxi said seriously. Once Long Tianma's illness was brought to the Council of Elders, things would become much more complicated. Not only would it become a contest between her and Emperor Tianhui, but the various factions of the Medical Academy's Council of Elders as well. After all, Shi Yuba and Luo Zuishan were representatives of different factions. At this point, Han Yunxi didn't want to cause any more trouble for herself. She just wanted to prove that she didn't misdiagnose. She didn't care about anything else. Luo Zuishan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked meaningfully at Han Yunxi before lowering his voice. Old man can give you a clear answer, but you have to answer old man's question first. Senior, please speak, Han Yunxi said without hesitation. But unexpectedly, Luo Zuishan's question was completely unexpected. He said, Han Yunxi, what's your relationship with Gu? It really was Gu who had invited Luo Zuishan. What's your relationship with Gu? Han Yunxi blurted out. Who would have thought that at this moment, the carriage would suddenly come to a stop? Then, the horses raised their front hooves, and the cries of the horses soared into the sky. Be careful, there's an assassin. Gu Beiyue shouted as he tried to control the carriage. Han Yunxi wanted to come out and take a look, but it was too late. She followed Luo Zuishan and was tossed around in the carriage, completely out of control. Only the heavens knew how violently the carriage was jolting. Soon, the sounds of close combat could be heard from outside. The commotion was huge, and it seemed to be getting more and more intense. Qin Wangrong had brought many guards with him, so it was clear that there were also many assassins. Who were these assassins coming for? Almost everyone's first reaction was Han Yunxi. Who told her to be kidnapped so many times? Thus, most of the guards rushed towards her. But who would have thought that the assassins were actually coming for Crown Prince Long Tianma? In the chaos, the medicine boy was thrown off the carriage. Two black-clothed assassins flew up and actually drove the carriage away. At this moment, everyone finally understood. All guards, protect His Highness the Crown Prince. Qin Wangrong shouted as he raised his sword and pushed aside the guards by his side to be the first to rush over. Unfortunately, there were too many black-robed assassins. Qin Wangrong was outnumbered and held back by a few of them. All he could do was watch as Long Tianma's carriage drove further and further away. As soon as the carriage was far away, the black-robed assassins began to retreat. How could Qin Wang Rong be willing to give up? He cut off the carriage's reins and urged his horse to give chase. Seeing this, none of the guards dared to delay and followed closely behind. Soon enough, the scene was empty except for Han Yunxi's group. Luo Zuishan stroked his beard. Although he didn't say a word, his rapid movements betrayed his inner thoughts. It'd be best if Qin Wang Rong could get the crown prince back. Otherwise, Emperor Tianhui had every reason to go to Medical City and demand the crown prince back. He was the one who'd started this, so he'd be in the most trouble then. Damn it, just where did these assassins come from? Why did they kidnap Tianning's crown prince? Qin Wang Rong didn't return for a long time. Even Shi Yubao's patience ran out. Coldly, he looked at Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue and said in a strange tone, "This, it's simply a conspiracy." Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue would be the ones to benefit the most from Long Tianma's kidnapping and death. In other words, it was very possible that Han Yunxi and the rest had directed and acted out the kidnapping. Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue naturally understood Shi Yubao's meaning, but they were too lazy to pay him any attention. Luo Zuishan only laughed coldly and ridiculed, "Are Tianning's guards all good-for-nothings? They can't even protect a single carriage." In other words, Shi Yubao was afraid of the Council of Elders consultation and losing. It was very possible that Qin Wang Rong and Shi Yubao had directed and acted out the kidnapping. Shi Yubao was enraged. He was full of self-confidence and couldn't wait for the consultation to kick Luo Zuishan under his feet. Humph! Luo Zuishan snorted. He was equally full of self-confidence and wanted to suppress Shi Yubao during the consultation. Very soon, the two old men began to quarrel. Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue sat in the carriage, exchanging glances. Besides waiting for news from Qin Wang Rong, they didn't know what to do for now. Of course, they were certain that Luo Zuishan and Shi Yubao weren't the true culprits behind the scenes. Long Tianma had made plenty of enemies on a daily basis. Add that to the fact that he was the crown prince, and there were plenty of people in Tianning's court who wanted his life. Kidnapping the crown prince at a time like this is a bit interesting, Gu Beiyue chuckled in a low voice. Han Yunxi was still trying to figure it out when a group of black-robed assassins suddenly appeared from all directions and surrounded them. Luo Zuishan and Shi Yubao immediately stopped arguing and stared at each other in disbelief. How could there be more assassins? Who were they targeting this time? Are you guys in cahoots? Han Yunxi asked loudly as she subconsciously reached out to protect Gu Beiyue behind her. She didn't know martial arts either, but she knew poisons and hidden weapons. She could still give it a try. Gu Beiyue allowed Han Yunxi to protect him as a trace of warmth flitted through his eyes. The leader of the black-robed men didn't answer Han Yunxi, but raised his broadsword. "Brothers, attack! Capture them alive! You don't have the skills yet." Han Yunxi gave a cold snort. She was about to release her hidden weapons when the situation exceeded her expectations once again. All of the black-robed assassins suddenly rushed towards Shi Yubao and Luo Zuishan. The leader seized Luo Zuishan at lightning speed and turned to leave. What kind of rhythm was this? So these assassins weren't here for Han Yunxi either. Halt! Han Yunxi reacted very quickly. As she shouted, her hidden needles flew out, several of them aimed at the back of the leader's head. But who would have thought that the black-robed man would suddenly turn around and use Luo Zuishan as a shield? Han Yunxi had used a lethal poison in a moment of desperation. He would die without a doubt and wouldn't even have time to detoxify the poison. It was over. If Luo Zuishan died, she and Gu Beiyue wouldn't be able to live either. Han Yunxi wished she could withdraw all of her needles, but it was already too late. Just as the needles were about to sink into Luo Zuishan's head, Gu Beiyue's hand peeked out of his sleeve. A small golden throwing knife was hidden in his gentle jade-like hand. It seemed to be held lightly, but it gave off an inexplicable feeling of power. It was as if this throwing knife was an arrow on a fully loaded bow, about to explode at any moment. However, no one expected that there would be someone even faster than this throwing knife, and with even more explosive power. A red-robed man appeared out of thin air, his luxurious red robes fluttering in the wind. His ink-black hair fluttered in the wind, and his face was like that of a celestial being. With a glance in the air, he had already kicked out, sending Luo Zuishan and the black-robed assassin flying at the same time, dodging Han Yunxi's poison needles in the nick of time. The black-robed assassin wasn't someone easy to deal with. Even after falling to the ground, he didn't let go of Luo Zuishan. As soon as he landed, he grabbed Luo Zuishan and turned to flee without hesitation. At the same time, the other black-robed assassins surrounded the red-robed man. At this time, Han Yunxi came to her senses and immediately used her poison needles to help. Pear Blossom Teardrop Rain burst out like a rain of needles, drowning the black-robed assassins and helping the red-robed man out of his predicament. The red-robed man immediately chased after Luo Zuishan and the others, but he didn't forget to glance back and smile at Han Yunxi. This smile made his long and narrow eyes narrow. Although he was wearing a mask, he was still devastatingly beautiful. A red-robed evildoer with a warm smile. Who could it be? Han Yunxi was very sure that it was him, Gu. Although the black-robed assassins were menacing and had extraordinary strength, with Gu chasing after them, Han Yunxi was completely at ease. This guy's martial arts were exceptional and his poison skills were mysterious. He would definitely be able to protect Luo Zuishan. In the face of Han Yunxi's poison needles, the other black-robed assassins didn't linger and quickly fled. This time, Shi Yuba didn't make any sarcastic remarks. He looked at Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue with an uneasy expression. Were these assassins from the same group or two? Why had they come for the crown prince? Why had they kidnapped Luo Zuishan? Was it a personal grudge, or was it related to the Council of Elders consultation? The situation suddenly became somewhat incomprehensible. Would there be more assassins coming? If they did, who would they kidnap? In Old Man's opinion, we should leave first. Once we pass through the mountain in front, we'll reach Medical City. Let's see who dares to be arrogant then. Shi Yuba spoke arrogantly, but he was actually afraid. Han Yunxi refused. Director Luo should be back soon. We'll wait here. If you're afraid, you can leave first. Afraid? What a joke, Old Man is afraid. Old Man. Humph. Shi Yuba was filled with anger. As he spoke, he approached Han Yunxi. Wait, could Han Yunxi wait for Luo Zuishan to return? At this time, Gu had already taken care of the black-robed assassin and rescued Luo Zuishan safely. However, they didn't immediately turn back. Luo Zuishan carefully examined the black-robed assassin's corpse. After a thorough examination, he was very certain that this black-robed assassin was from Northernly and was a well-trained killer. Gu crossed his arms and leaned against a tree trunk, smiling. Aren't they all human? What's the difference? Their bones are different. Luo Zuishan thought back and forth. He hadn't offended anyone in Northernly. However, Gu wasn't on the same wavelength as him. Gu smiled and asked, "Hey, what do you think of that poison girl?" At this time, Luo Zuishan looked up, disdain written all over his face. Not much. Chapter 229. Luo Zuishan looked disdainful, but his heart was filled with astonishment. If he hadn't been kidnapped, he'd probably be asking Han Yunxi, "How's that kid Gu doing?" He'd watched Gu grow up, so there was probably no one else in the world who understood Gu better than him, right? A woman who could make Gu talk so much couldn't be simple. Moreover, Gu not only called her Poison Lass, but did Han Yunxi a huge favor as well. If not for Gu, Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue would have been sentenced to death by Emperor Tianhui long ago. What do you mean by not much? Gu's tone revealed a rare hint of anxiety. He always did things his own way and was unrestrained. Why did he suddenly care so much about other people's opinions? Seeing this, Luo Zuishan was even more incredulous. Finally, he couldn't help but ask, "Kid, do you fancy that girl's poison skills, or her person?" The simple-minded Gu spaced out for a second, but quickly gave Luo Zuishan a serious and definite answer. Of course it's her poison skills. What's so good about her poison skills? Is she better than you? I saw her use those poison needles just then, but they were only so-so. Luo Zuishan was deliberately belittling him. Although he didn't understand assassination weapons, he could tell that the strength and speed of those needles were extraordinary. So-so. Actually, seriously speaking, they're not that great, Gu smiled. Of course Luo Zuishan didn't believe him, but continued probing. Really? Gu finally caught on and rolled his eyes, his expression indifferent. It's up to you to believe it or not. If you don't, forget it. Humph. Luo Zuishan grew angry. He narrowed his eyes and drew closer to Gu. Stinking brat, you used old man's position as director to apply for an elder's command decree from the Council of Elders for the sake of a mere poison-using girl. Do you think that's fun? What do you see in that girl? Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue had only been locked up in the Supreme Court for 2 days before Luo Zuishan, who was far away in Northernly, was able to rush over with the Elder's token. This speed was all thanks to Gu's help. Luo Zuishan was truly enraged. Not only had Gu told him about Shi Yubao's misdiagnosis, but he had also used his position as a director as a wager to apply for an elder's order to the Council of Elders for a consultation. No, to be more precise, Gu had acted first and reported later. He had first used Luo Zuishan's title as a director as a wager to apply for a consultation elder decree from the Council of Elders. Only then did he inform Luo Zuishan of Shi Yubao's misdiagnosis. As such, Luo Zuishan had no choice but to make an appearance. After all, if Luo Zuishan couldn't prove that Shi Yubao's diagnosis was wrong, then his position as director would be stripped. In reality, Luo Zuishan still hadn't figured out what was going on with Long Tianmao's big belly. The reason he was so confident that he could defeat Shi Yubao at the Council of Elders was because Gu had promised to tell him the secret of Long Tianmao's big belly as soon as they arrived at Medical City. Although Luo Zuishan believed that Gu was reliable in this kind of major matter, if Gu didn't have other motives and really was tormenting him like this for the sake of a girl, Luo Zuishan would still feel very sad. I took a fancy to her poison skills. Gu still gave the same answer. Luo Zuishan didn't say anything, but his gaze suddenly became sharp, as if it could penetrate everything. He stared at Gu, clearly still not believing him. Helpless, the more he stared, the more brilliant Gu's smile became. Hee, I also took a fancy to her in passing. Picking out the person he liked, how could this kind of thing be done conveniently? As he spoke, he lazily straightened his body from the tree trunk and walked back the way he came. Han Yunxi would probably be waiting for him to rescue Luo Zuishan and bring him back. He helped that girl again. Why did he like helping her so much? Luo Zuishan looked at his back, thinking back and forth, repeatedly pondering over his words. Suddenly, he came to a realization and asked in surprise, "Boy, she can't be the person you've been looking for all this time, right?" Gu had always been looking for a person, a woman. In the whole world, only Luo Zuishan knew. Gu's footsteps paused for a moment, but he quickly recovered his original speed. What answered Luo Zuishan was a flirtatious and silent back. Gu seemed to be walking casually, but he was actually taking small steps in the air and moving very quickly. By the time Luo Zuishan caught up, they had already returned to the place where the caravan had stopped. Everything in front of him left Luo Zuishan, who was originally anxious to ask questions, dumbstruck, and Gu's expression instantly changed. How could this be? Han Yunxi and Shi Yubao's carriages had all flipped over, and it was a chaotic scene from a fierce battle. Shi Yubao and Gu Beiwei were both injured and had fallen to the side, but Han Yunxi had disappeared. Where's Han Yunxi? Gu angrily said, grabbing Gu Beiwei's collar. After you guys left, another group of assassins showed up. These three groups should be from the same group. Their target was Qin Wangfei, but esteemed Wangfei was outnumbered, Gu Beiwei said seriously. Gu finally understood and pushed Gu Beiwei away. This old man has been played. This group of assassins had moved in batches, taking Long Tianma and Luo Zuishan in turn. They had scattered their forces and lured the tiger away from the mountain. The third group of assassins is much more powerful than the first two, and they all know how to use poison. Who did that damned girl Han Yunxi offend? The black-clothed man who took her away is definitely a top-level expert. The frightened Shi Yubao couldn't help speaking. The scene just now was as dangerous as it could be. They were all black-clothed masked men, and each of them had strong martial arts and powerful poison techniques. Han Yunxi couldn't deal with them all by herself, and in the end, she was taken away by the black-clothed man with the strongest martial arts. Top-level expert. Gu seemed to have guessed who it was and was very disdainful. That's right, they also know poison techniques. Shi Yubao quickly added. A complicated look flashed in Gu Beiwei's eyes, but he didn't say anything. In the chaos just now, he had seen everything clearly, so he held back and didn't make a move. This group of black-clothed assassins knew poison techniques, but the black-clothed man who took away Han Yunxi didn't know poison techniques. It was a black-clothed man who had mixed in with the black-clothed assassins. Where did they go? Gu angrily looked at Shi Yubao. Shi Yubao didn't know why, but when he met Gu's long and narrow eyes filled with anger, he suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. Many years ago, the youth who had been expelled from the medical academy, the foster son of the first elder of the Council of Elders who fed him medicine every day, had the same look in his eyes when he turned around and stepped out of the medical academy's gates. Those long and narrow eyes were as bright as the sun when he smiled. How could they hide such deep hostility? Could this red-robed masked man be him, Gu Qisha? Gu Qisha was only 10 years old when he was expelled from the medical academy. Within a few years, he had established his own sect and founded the Medicine Ghost Valley. For the past few years, he had always been wearing a black cloak and a mask, and no one had ever seen his true face. Even his foster father, the first elder of the medical academy, didn't know what he looked like. Shi Yubao was still immersed in his memories and didn't answer. Gu didn't have that much patience and kicked him. Where did they go? Speak. Only the heavens knew how heavy Gu's kick was. Shi Yubao spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot and couldn't answer. Fortunately, Gu Beiwei answered in time, the northern forest. Without another word, Gu chased after them. He had followed them all the way to ensure Han Yunxi's smooth journey to Medical City. Just which damned bastard had lured him away and ruined his plans. If Luo Zuishan hadn't been kidnapped, he wouldn't have made a move at all. After Gu left, Shi Yubao ignored the blood at the corner of his mouth and anxiously looked at Luo Zuishan. You know him. Luo Zuishan sneered inwardly. How could they just know each other? However, he only shook his head and asked Gu Beiwei, Qin Wangfei knows him, right? Gu Beiwei naturally guessed that the person was Gu, but he played dumb and shook his head. This one isn't sure. Gu searched the northern forest for half a day but didn't find any clues. At the same time, Han Yunxi was perched on top of a boulder by the edge of the forest, the last rays of the setting sun casting a long shadow over her back. The black-clothed man stood behind her. His figure was tall and proud. Han Yunxi wasn't short, but she only reached his chest. He was masked and dressed in black, his entire body exuding a mysterious and unfathomable aura. In the fading afterglow of the setting sun, he was like a god of the night descending to the mortal world. He had kidnapped Han Yunxi and had been silent the entire way here. They had just settled down. He was speechless. Han Yunxi was speechless. Her back was to him, and she didn't dare to turn around for a long time. In the beginning, when faced with so many black-clothed men who knew poison, Han Yunxi knew that they were the Sanhua Prince Zhu Nixie's men. However, when this black-clothed man suddenly appeared and kidnapped her, she began to doubt her own judgment. This guy wasn't Zhu Nixie. He had mixed in with Zhu Nixie's men and secretly took her away. Who was this guy? What was his goal in kidnapping her? Why hadn't he spoken yet? After hesitating for a long time, Han Yunxi was the first to speak. Those three groups of assassins are in cahoots. You're not. You're so sure. The black-clothed man asked indifferently. Zhu Nixie first kidnapped Long Tianma, then kidnapped Luo Zuishan. He's just trying to lure. Han Yunxi said, but hesitated. Zhu Nixie's kidnapping method couldn't be to lure out Long Feiyi, who was hiding nearby, and lure Long Feiyi away from the mountain. Besides Long Feiyi, who else could make Zhu Nixie go to such lengths? Long Tianma was kidnapped. Long Feiyi didn't have to show up, but Luo Zuishan was kidnapped. If Long Feiyi was here, he would definitely show up to save him. Who knew that Long Feiyi wasn't here, but Gu would appear? After confirming that Long Feiyi wasn't here, it would be easy for Zhu Nixie to kidnap her or even kill her. After suffering such a big loss last time, Zhu Nixie, who had always wanted to rope her in, probably already had the intention to kill her. He must have been waiting for an opportunity to make his move. Had Long Feiyi ever considered this point for her? Han Yunxi realized that her mind had wandered. She took a deep breath. Han Yunxi smiled and didn't continue speaking. Instead, she turned around with a calm expression. Let's not talk nonsense and get straight to the point. What's your goal? Who knew that the black-clothed masked man would actually laugh softly? Who was he? Chapter 230. A smile could always close the distance between them. But even when the person in front of her smiled, he gave off an unapproachable feeling of loneliness and coldness. Han Yunxi mused that some people were just like that. They were born cold and arrogant, forming a world of their own that made them unapproachable. Even if you were standing right in front of them, you'd still feel like they were far away on the horizon. You'd never be able to enter their world. Just like Long Feiyi. That's right, right now she was experiencing the same feeling as standing in front of Long Feiyi. For a moment, Han Yunxi was almost certain that this black-robed man was Long Feiyi, but she quickly rejected the idea. Tianning's court was in turmoil, Mama Su's matter had been exposed, and Qin Wangrong had appeared. The situation wasn't looking good, and Long Feiyi had already abandoned her to avoid arousing suspicion. How could he possibly come to her rescue? If he wanted to save her, he would have done so long ago. Why wait until now? That fellow never liked to drag things out. Even though there was still a trace of disappointment in her heart, Han Yunxi proudly ignored it. She raised her chin and asked cold, "What are you laughing at?" The black-robed man seemed to want to tear off his mask, but his hand twitched before he gave up. He didn't answer Han Yunxi, but said mildly, "Let's go. I'll send you to Medical City." Now Han Yunxi was bewildered. Just who are you? Why are you taking me to Medical City? The black-robed man didn't seem to like talking much. His slender finger lightly pressed against his lips, indicating that Han Yunxi didn't need to ask any more questions. He reached out with his other hand, intending to take her hand. Han Yunxi reflexively retreated, her face full of vigilance. The pear blossom teardrop rain hidden in her sleeve immediately readied for action. A playful look flitted past the black-robed man's eyes. Suddenly, his figure flashed and landed behind Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi immediately turned around, but it was too late. The black-robed man had firmly grasped her hand with the pear blossom teardrop rain, preventing her from using her concealed weapon. This was her Achilles heel. Let go! Han Yunxi shouted angrily. Her other elbow immediately stabbed backward. The poison needle hidden in her elbow protruded out. Unfortunately, the black-clothed man seemed to have known beforehand and easily avoided it. Han Yunxi didn't give up struggling. She stomped on the black-clothed man's foot. Unfortunately, the black-clothed man not only dodged, but also stepped on her foot to pin her down. She had so many poisonous needles hidden on her body, she didn't believe that she couldn't stab this guy with one. She kicked again with her other leg and struck with her other hand. She turned her head and spat out several needles. Even when she tilted her head, poisonous needles could fly out of her neck. She was really going all out. But soon, it was proven that Han Yunxi had underestimated the other party. She had used almost all her skills, but the man behind her had always grabbed her wrist with one hand and dealt with her with the other with ease. He was not injured at all. In the end, Han Yunxi, who had always been calm, almost broke down. She shouted angrily, "Bastard, let go of me. Who are you? Will you get pregnant if you speak?" However, the black-clothed man didn't make a sound. If this guy hadn't just spoken, she would have thought that he was a mute. How could he be so patient? How could he let her struggle and question him so many times without making a sound? In the end, it was the angry Han Yunxi who calmed down. She sighed deeply, turned her back to him, and didn't say anything. The black-clothed man still didn't say anything, but he stretched out one hand and wrapped it around Han Yunxi's small waist. This hug was so smooth and tight. She didn't know if it was because his hands were too big or because they were too cold, but when those slightly rough hands gently brushed against her clothes, she couldn't help but tremble a little. He pulled her into his arms and turned her to face him. Han Yunxi was a sensible person. Although she was angry, she had already given up struggling in her heart. No matter what this guy's background was, since he wanted to take her to Medical City, then she would go. She would take one step at a time. However, when she turned sideways and inadvertently met the black-clothed man's cold eyes, she actually saw the playfulness in his eyes. So, this guy's actions were actually teasing her. Han Yunxi realized in hindsight. Her beautiful brows suddenly furrowed. She stared at the black-clothed man, wishing that she could kill him with her gaze. Seeing this, the black-clothed man, who was about to leave, suddenly stopped. The playfulness in his eyes deepened. Han Yunxi didn't know if it was her imagination, but there seemed to be a faint smile hidden in his playfulness. She had to admit that when those eyes, which were as deep as the sea and as cold as ice, smiled, they were really beautiful. It was as if the snow had melted and the flowers had bloomed in the warmth of spring. The more Han Yunxi looked at him, the more familiar he seemed. She unconsciously looked more and more seriously. She was very sure that she had seen this guy somewhere before. She thought about it, but she couldn't remember where. The masked man also looked at her. She didn't know if it was because her dazed gaze had affected him or because he was serious. His cold eyes actually warmed up as he quietly looked at her. The two of them held each other as their eyes met. It was silent in all directions. At the peak of the forest, on the cliff, the entire world was silent. But suddenly, Han Yunxi suddenly raised her head and fiercely bit down on the black-clothed man's arm. The black-clothed man obviously didn't expect this as he suddenly retracted his warm gaze. Not to mention his eyes, even his entire face became abnormally cold. Han Yunxi bit down on his arm tightly and didn't let go. Fresh blood flowed out, but the man only stared at her and didn't push her away. He didn't even make a sound. This fellow, what kind of person was he? In just a short moment, the blood turned black. Without a doubt, Han Yunxi had poisoned him. But even so, the masked man still didn't move. He withdrew his gaze and silently watched as the black blood flowed out from Han Yunxi's mouth. He didn't have any intention to move. To hide poison in one's mouth, unless one wanted to commit suicide, they would usually hide some ordinary poison. Otherwise, if they accidentally swallowed it or contaminated their mouth, it would be troublesome. Although ordinary poison wasn't strong, but as long as it penetrated deeper into the flesh and blood, the poison wouldn't be too weak. Hence Han Yunxi bit down with all her might, hoping that the poison would penetrate deeper and deeper. This masked man was an expert, so if the poison didn't penetrate deeper, Han Yunxi wouldn't be at ease. Hence, she tried her best to use up all the poison in her mouth before the masked man pushed her away. But who knew that as time slowly trickled by, the masked man still didn't move. Finally, Han Yunxi had used up all the poison in her mouth, but the black-clothed man still didn't move. Could it be that the poison had turned him into a retard? There wasn't any poison in this world which could poison a retard. What was going on? She had obviously succeeded in her plot, but such a silent reaction made the back of Han Yunxi's head feel a chill and she felt extremely uneasy. She hesitated for a moment and carefully released her mouth. She raised her head and saw the masked man staring at her without moving. That gaze seemed to be deep in thought. This fellow, didn't it hurt? Could it be that the pain had turned him into a retard? If it was in the past, Han Yunxi would have suavely pushed the masked man away and at the same time stomped on him before escaping. But this time, she didn't dare to move. Instead, she carefully said, "I can give you the antidote, as long as you let me go." Finally, the masked man spoke. His voice was as cold as ice. "Han Yunxi, you could have killed me earlier. This isn't the first time. For over 20 years, no one had been able to get so close to him, not to mention injure or kill him. But this woman had done it more than once. Earlier, his life had once again fallen into her hands. He didn't like this feeling, but he had unknowingly fallen into her hands several times. To him who had been cautious at every step since he was young and had set up defenses everywhere, this was undoubtedly handing his life over to her. He was sure that this woman was trustworthy, but was she that trustworthy? The masked man's words confused Han Yunxi. She was about to break free when a white figure suddenly flipped over from afar. The person who came was none other than the fake banished immortal, Tang Li. When Han Yunxi saw Tang Li, she was shocked and immediately blurted out, "Save me." When Tang Li saw the masked man carrying Han Yunxi and the wound on his arm, he was also shocked and blurted out, "Long Fei Yi, you've been bitten." Long Fei Yi. Ah, Long Fei Yi. It's him. Han Yunxi was so shocked that her face turned pale. She widened her eyes and stared at Long Fei Yi's masked face in disbelief. At the same time, Long Fei Yi finally retracted his thoughtful gaze and gently pushed Han Yunxi away. Thus, Han Yunxi, who was in a state of extreme shock, fell to the ground with a bang. Long Fei Yi, you, Han Yunxi couldn't regain her senses. She didn't expect that he would come to save her. She also didn't expect that after saving her, he would still have the leisure to tease her. Was this her dream or Long Fei Yi's dream? Han Yunxi was in a daze. "What are you guys doing?" Tang Li, who was still in shock, finally spoke. Han Yunxi was speechless. Long Fei Yi ignored her and turned around. He took off his mask and lowered his head to suck out the poisoned blood from his arm. Han Yunxi, you bit him and even poisoned him. You actually. Tang Li didn't know what to say. He really wanted to praise Han Yunxi. In this world, only this woman could torment Long Fei Yi like this. Han Yunxi didn't know that Tang Li was amazed in his heart. She only thought that he was angry. Well, Long Fei Yi came to save her. It was indeed wrong of her to bite Lu Dongbin like a dog, but who told Long Fei Yi to stay silent and not reveal his identity? If she didn't bite him, did he plan to take her to Medical City without saying anything? Did he plan to never reveal his identity? Han Yunxi found that she couldn't see through this guy more and more. Feeling wronged in her heart, Han Yunxi was too lazy to explain. She hurriedly walked to Long Fei Yi and said, "Sit down. I'll use acupuncture to detoxify you. There's too much poison. I can't suck it all out." Long Fei Yi didn't say anything, but when faced with Han Yunxi's direct gaze, his eyes were somewhat evasive. He sat down obediently. At this time, Han Yunxi tactfully didn't ask or say anything. She silently used acupuncture to detoxify him. However, the damn Tang Li didn't know how to save trouble. He watched from the side and couldn't help but ask, "Long Fei Yi, you just took off your mask. Were you playing with her? Playing with a woman? How could Long Fei Yi do such a thing?" Chapter 231. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had a tacit understanding of what kind of shady business Long Fei Yi had just done. Both of them were currently in an awkward situation, so Tang Li's question only made the atmosphere even stranger. Naturally, the taciturn Long Fei Yi wouldn't answer. Han Yunxi lowered her head as she silently applied acupuncture to detoxify Long Fei Yi. Her face was expressionless as she pretended not to hear anything. Tang Li rubbed his chin as he gave the two of them a suspicious look. He seemed to have noticed something amiss and snickered silently to himself. Tang Li had shut his mouth, but his words had already set off perilous waves that couldn't be quelled. She didn't know what Long Fei Yi's current state of mind was, but Han Yunxi's heart had long been turned upside down and thrown into disarray. Why was he playing with her? Did he have nothing better to do? Was he bored? Or was he in a good mood today? But even if he was bored or in a good mood, he still wouldn't do something like this. In Han Yunxi's impression, as well as everyone else's, Tianning's Duke of Qin was nothing but cold and indifferent. Forget joking around, he didn't even know how to smile. Or perhaps, this was another side of Long Fei Yi that few people knew about. She just didn't know about it all this time. In any case, Han Yunxi couldn't find a reason. She quietly mulled things over in her mind until her thoughts wandered as she applied the needles. Abruptly, Long Fei's arm shuddered before he spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. Ah! It wasn't Long Fei Yi who cried out, but Han Yunxi's. She'd pricked the wrong acupuncture point. "I'm sorry, I know it hurts a lot." With the wrong acupuncture point, the pain of the needle was comparable to a knife stabbing into one's heart. It was unbearable. As a doctor, Han Yunxi knew this best. "I didn't do it on purpose. I know it hurts a lot, but it'll be better soon. Bear with it." She'd always been confident in detoxifying poisons, but this was probably the most flustered she'd ever been in her 2 lifetimes. He didn't seem like a doctor at all. She braced herself and looked over. Long Fei Yi happened to be looking over as well. He didn't cry out in pain, nor did he blame her. He just gave her a cold look before turning his head away. From the side, she could see that he was frowning. The curve of his face was so handsome that it angered both men and gods. One could only imagine how painful it was for him to frown. Han Yunxi really felt guilty. Facing his indifference, she didn't know what to say. She could only silently continue the acupuncture. However, after a while, she was distracted again. Should he question him? Long Fei Yi, is it fun to play with me like this? Long Fei Yi, you deserve to be bitten. Long Fei Yi, you're already an adult. Aren't you bored? Long Fei Yi, you have to apologize. Otherwise, I won't detoxify you. All kinds of self-righteous questions kept echoing in her mind. If it was any other time, even if she was facing him, she would still dare to question him. However, it was so awkward this time. When she thought of how Long Fei Yi had flirted with her just now, she didn't dare to ask. She even didn't dare to look him in the eye. Han Yunxi was so confused. In this confusion, Han Yunxi made a mistake again. She pricked the wrong acupoint again. This time, blood didn't spurt out. Instead, all the black blood stopped flowing. Han Yunxi actually didn't realize it until Tang Li reminded her. Has the poisoned blood been expelled so quickly? Ah. Han Yunxi looked up. Without waiting for Tang Li to answer, she immediately looked down at Long Fei Ye's wound. Only then did she realize that she was ridiculously wrong. Damn it. She despised herself in her heart but didn't dare to talk nonsense. She buried her head and hurriedly changed the needles. Long Fei Yi didn't move, but his cold and handsome face was much paler. After a while, Han Yunxi finally managed to expel all the poison from Long Fei Ye's arm. She applied medicine and carefully bandaged the wound. Tang Li came over at this time. He rubbed his chin and glanced at Long Fei Ye's wound. He said slowly, Long Fei Yi, this is your first time being bitten by a woman, right? At this point, neither of them responded. Tang Li continued casually, you let her bite you on purpose, right? As soon as he said that, Han Yunxi suddenly tightened her grip on the bandage. She tightened her grip and the bandage wrapped around the wound. Ha! Long Fei Yi groaned heavily and finally turned his head to look over. However, he seemed to want to act as if nothing had happened and directly avoided Han Yunxi. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Tang Li, coldly. He asked, where's Long Tianma? After Han Yunxi's group left the Supreme Court, he followed them and secretly protected them. When the black-clothed assassin kidnapped Long Tianma, Tang Li had already secretly chased after him. When Luo Zuishan was kidnapped, he also wanted to send people to track him down. He only gave up when he saw Gu appear. In this consultation, Long Tianma was very important. Luo Zuishan was also very important. However, as long as Han Yunxi was still around, he wouldn't appear for anyone. How could Jun Yixie's plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain escape his eyes? When Long Fei Yi asked this, Tang Li remembered that he had rushed over for an urgent matter. He was taken away by Jun Yixie. His mother's poison skills are too powerful. I can't beat him. Tang Li quickly replied. He went to look for Long Tianmo. Long Fei Yi was a little surprised. Jun Yixie used the plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain, and Long Fei Yi beat him at his own game. As long as Jun Yixie didn't personally appear, it would be easy for Tang Li to deal with the black-clothed assassins and rescue Long Tianmo. But who knew that Jun Yixie, who should have chased Long Fei Yi, didn't chase after him. Instead, he turned around to protect Long Tianmo. It had to be admitted that if Long Tianmo fell into Jun Yixie's hands, there would be a lot of trouble. This prince underestimated him. Long Fei Yi was a step behind. This made Long Fei Yi very unhappy. This guy's background is mysterious. I investigated for a long time in Northernly, but I couldn't find anything about him. Tang Li said seriously. Han Yunxi listened silently on the side. She had a rough idea of what was going on. Just as she was about to ask, a black-clothed guard rushed over and reported in a panic, "Your Highness, Dreamy sent someone to pass on a message." He said. Although the black-clothed guard was anxious, he stuttered and didn't dare to continue speaking. "Is he seeking death? Hurry up and speak." Tang Li was anxious. The black-clothed guard glanced at Han Yunxi before continuing. "Dreamy sent someone to pass on a message. He wants your highness to exchange esteemed Wang Fei for his highness the crown prince." At this, Long Fei suddenly looked straight at the black-clothed guard. His piercing gaze made the guard shiver uncontrollably, as if he'd committed some heinous crime. Han Yunxi wasn't surprised. Dreamy had kidnapped so many people for her sake. The medical academy's consultation had nothing to do with him at all. If she was exchanged for Long Tianma, the medical academy's consultation could still continue. Luo Zuishan could prove that she and Gu Beiyue weren't guilty, so the Duke of Qin's estate wouldn't be implicated, right? Moreover, if news of this reached Emperor Tianhui's ears, Long Fei would be able to cut ties with her and express goodwill towards the emperor. It wasn't that Han Yunxi was looking down on Long Fei, but that a wise man submits to circumstances. A man who tries to be brave isn't a hero. After all, Tianning was still Emperor Tianhui's world, while Long Fei was only a king. Han Yunxi was still trying to figure out the intricacies of the situation when Long Fei asked, "When and where?" 3 days from now, at noon at Xiankong Temple. "If you're late, what?" Silence. The black-clothed guard's voice trembled. "Silence. Kill Tianning's crown prince." Tang Li's face paled a few shades as he looked at Long Fei. He wanted to speak, but stopped himself. Dreamy was too insolent, wasn't he? With Long Fei's personality, he'd definitely come to save the woman instead of swapping her out. He'd protect both Han Yunxi and Long Tianmo. But this time, Dreamy wouldn't have dared to say such words unless he'd made sufficient preparations. Long Fei wouldn't be able to gain the upper hand in this situation. In fact, it was highly possible that he'd be trapped in a tiger's den with no return. Han Yunxi understood the intricacies of the situation as well. Seeing Long Fei's stern profile, she spoke without hesitation. "Go ahead and swap. When the time comes, you guys can leave. I have my own ways to deal with him." But Long Fei's eyes immediately turned cold at her words. He said angrily, "Han Yunxi, do you think your lordship came here for nothing?" He'd gone to great lengths to save this woman, but she was going to deliver herself to his doorstep. Wouldn't everything he'd done be wasted? What kind of person did she take him for? Would he hand over the woman under his name so easily? Or did she take his act at the justice courts for real? Han Yunxi was rendered speechless by his fierce words. Sensing the change in the atmosphere, Tang Li hastened to smooth things over. "Of course you have to go. When the time comes, you two can work together to deal with Dreamy. Leave the rest to me." Unexpectedly, Long Fei tossed him 2 words. "I'm not going." "What?" Tang Li was frightened. After all, once Long Tianma died, there'd be no end to Emperor Tianhui's problems. Han Yunxi gave a start, wondering if she'd heard wrong. But Long Fei's next words left her completely stupefied. He ordered the black-robed guards, "Go tell Dreamy that even if he has the skills to trade Northern Li's lands for her, your lordship won't do the exchange." He didn't need to trade for what he wanted, he'd never hand over what he had. Long Fei turned to leave as soon as he finished speaking, leaving Han Yunxi frozen in place. She didn't know what to do. Who could tell her if those words just now could be considered as overbearing words of love? This man had actually given her the answer to a choice between a country and a woman. But who could tell her why she still felt distant and unfamiliar as she watched his retreating form? It was as if that icy kiss from the past had meant a lot, but it also felt like nothing. Han Yunxi stood there in a daze. Long Fei Yi had already walked far away, but he still turned back to look at her cold voice. Han Yunxi, you're still not leaving. Where are we going? Han Yunxi asked without a second thought. I told you just then. Why aren't you leaving? Long Fei Yi urged impatiently. Just now. He'd said he'd take her to Medical City when he was teasing her. So he hadn't forgotten what happened just then. Han Yunxi was still a little confused, but she couldn't help but smile. There was no need to ask about what happened in the justice courts. No matter what, it was good that he'd come. She quickly caught up to him and walked by his side. Soon enough, Long Fei Yi took her into his arms and flew into the air towards Medical City. 3 days later, Jun Yixia waited for nothing at Xiankong Temple. Chapter 232. Jun Yixia sat cross-legged on the praying mat in front of the Buddha statue, mulling over Long Fei Yi's words. Exchanging Northern Li's empire for a woman, he looked calm, but his clenched fists betrayed him. He might be mad, but Long Fei Yi was even crazier. He assumed that Long Fei Yi would team up with Han Yunxi to kidnap Long Tianmo, but that fellow didn't even show up. All of Xiankong Temple's inescapable net had been laid for naught. Today, Jun Yixia sat from noon until sunset. By the time the skies fell, he was certain that Long Fei Yi wouldn't show up. They'd agreed to silence him if he missed the deadline. But what was he supposed to do if he missed the deadline? Jun Yixia had to think it over carefully. If Han Yunxi hadn't taken off his mask in Medicine City and exposed his true face to Long Fei Yi, he would have been happier if Long Fei Yi didn't show up today. He would have chopped off Long Tianmo's head without hesitation and delivered it to Emperor Tianhui so he could bite off Long Fei Yi's head. Unfortunately, his identity had already been exposed. Northern Li's Duke of Kong represented the Northern Li imperial clan, so he couldn't help but have misgivings. He had to be on guard against Long Fei Yi using his identity to make a fuss. He wasn't of imperial blood, but he was the most favored duke. Plenty of Northern Li's imperial clan members would want to find fault with him. Seeing Jun Yixia rise to his feet, one of his attendants stepped forward. Master, Long Fei Yi wouldn't really care about that woman, would he? Jun Yixia laughed coldly. Long Fei Yi, does he have a heart? The attendant was even more confused. Then he shouldn't, a single lie in exchange for a useful woman's heart. Jun Yixia paused as he spoke, then turned around with a serious expression. It's worth it. Han Yunxi's poison skills were not only exquisite but also mysterious. With the help of such a woman, how many surprises would there be? To Jun Yixia, one Han Yunxi was equivalent to a group of poison men that he had raised. Hence, even though Han Yunxi had ruined many of his plans and had even poisoned him, he had never really intended to kill her and still wanted to rope her in. Lying to a woman. The attendants didn't understand. In his impression, his lord had never been close to women. When facing women, let alone lying and coaxing, he wouldn't even greet them. Master, then. Tianning's crown prince. The attendant was more concerned about this matter. What should he do with Long Tianmo now? They couldn't kill him, but they couldn't just let him go. Wouldn't that be too cowardly? His subordinates were alarmed and worried for their master. However, Jun Yixia already had a plan. He said in a low voice, "Bring me the 100 leaves purple jade grass." The attendant grew alarmed at his words and reminded him, "Master, this poison, we still don't have an antidote." His lord wanted to poison Long Tianmo before letting him go. He could let him go then. But he had to have a handle on him first. The 100 Leaves Purple Jade Grass was a poison that June Xia had named after June Xia because it was a completely new poison that had never been seen before. June Xia had been cultivating new poisons in Medicine City's medicine forest. Although Han Yunxi had interrupted his work, he still had some ingredients on hand. Over the past few months, he'd managed to cultivate 3 new poisons. The poisons had been cultivated, but the antidote was still missing. In other words, there was no cure for these 3 poisons. The 100 Leaves Purple Jade Grass's poison wasn't fatal, but it was extremely torturous. It made one's bones ache all over and made them immobile. It's precisely because we don't have an antidote that there's no chance of failure. June Xia laughed coldly as he walked towards the rear courtyard of the monastery. This time, he'd like to see if Han Yunxi had the skills to deal with the 100 Leaves Purple Jade Grass. He wanted to make it impossible for Han Yunxi to survive in Tianning and force Long Fei Yi to give up on Han Yunxi. In the rear courtyard, Long Tianma was still lying in his carriage, completely unconscious and powerless. His body was covered in thick bedding, so anyone who didn't know better would think he was a normal person sleeping peacefully. June Xia boarded the carriage and only glanced at Long Tianma's face before looking away. Forget about the Tianning Crown Prince, he didn't even care about the Tianning Emperor. In all of Tianning, only Long Fei Yi could be considered a hindrance to him. He sat silently on one side until an attendant delivered the 100 Leaves Purple Jade Grass. Then he personally lifted Long Tianma's ink-black bedding and revealed Long Tianma's protruding belly. What's going on? June Xia revealed a rare expression of shock, while the surrounding attendants were caught off guard as well, their faces filled with surprise. A grown man actually had a big belly. Before June Xia could move, the attendants who'd recovered their wits rushed forward to take off Long Tianma's robes. Once they did, the truth was revealed. It really was a big belly, as if he was pregnant. Master, how is this possible? The attendants were stunned. Everyone knew that Tianning's crown prince had been ill for a long time. As for what illness he was suffering from, there were all sorts of different theories. No one knew the truth. This time, Luo Zuishan had beaten the drums in the justice courts to lodge a complaint, so everyone knew about it. Unfortunately, they still didn't publicize the crown prince's relapse. June Xia only knew about the medical academy's consultation, but he didn't know about Long Tianma's illness. He didn't care either. Escapades. This was June Xia's first reaction. Medicine and poisons were one family, and he was an expert in poisons. Naturally, he knew quite a bit about medicine as well. But when June Xia examined him carefully, his expression changed. His cold eyes were filled with complicated emotions. Seeing this, the attendants didn't dare to ask any questions, but June Xia continued to mutter to himself, "It's not ascites," but June Xia didn't finish his sentence, as if he wasn't certain. He carefully examined him again, but this time his brows furrowed even more. He was absolutely certain that this wasn't ascites, but goo. Long Tianma wasn't suffering from any illness, nor was he suffering from a relapse. Someone had used goo on him. Goo was one of the most terrifying poisons in the world. Goo was a poison technique created by the poison sect of the Medical Academy. After the Medical Academy's poison sect was banned, goo had disappeared from Cloud Realm continent for many years. Leaving aside goo, very few people even knew about the poison sect's existence in the Medical Academy. There were 3 types of goo: high, medium, and low. Grass as goo, insects as goo, and humans as goo. Using humans as goo was June Xia's ultimate goal in raising poison humans and poison corpses, human goo. June Xia understood goo. Shi Yuba knows goo arts. Luo Zuishan knows them too. He was puzzled. Long Tianma's illness had been caused by Emperor Tianhui using Shi Yuba to frame Han Yunxi, so Shi Yuba was the only one who'd used the goo. Meanwhile, Luo Zuishan had requested a decree from the Council of Elders to overturn Shi Yuba's diagnosis and request a consultation. It looked like Luo Zuishan knew that Long Tianma had been afflicted with goo as well. With the qualifications of the two directors, it wasn't impossible for them to secretly learn some goo arts. But Jun Yixia couldn't figure out why Luo Zuishan dared to request a public consultation if it was goo. After all, goo was a huge taboo in the current medical academy. Leaving aside a public consultation, even private discussions about it were forbidden. Could Luo Zuishan have misdiagnosed it as some other illness? How could Luo Zuishan make a mistake when things had gotten so big? There was something fishy going on here that made Jun Yixia smell the scent of a conspiracy. Of course, he didn't have the leisure to care about the medical academy's affairs. His target had always been Han Yunxi. Thus, that very night, Jun Yixia cured Long Tianma of the goo and gave him the hypertoxic 100-leaf purple jade grass. In one night, Long Tianma's big belly disappeared, leaving his entire body in pain. Early in the morning, Jun Yixia didn't even spare Long Tianma a glance before ordering coldly, "Send him to the medical academy before he wakes up." He thought that since he'd interfered like this, the consultation would definitely be splendid. "Han Yunxi, if you can cure the goo this time, then your lordship will admire you. But if you can't, then just wait for Emperor Tianhui to punish you. Your lordship would like to see if Long Feiyi can still protect you." Long Tianma was on his way to the medical academy while Qin Wangrong was still doing his best to track down Long Tianma's whereabouts. Luo Zuishan, Shi Yuba, and Gu Beiyue had already arrived at the medical academy, but Gu was nowhere to be found. Long Tianma and Han Yunxi were both missing, so the consultation naturally couldn't proceed. Emperor Tianhui had spread word that the medical academy had to send Gu Beiyue back to Tianning's capital city in 5 days. Long Tianma and Han Yunxi's disappearance had to be explained to Tianning as well. The Council of Elders didn't express any opinions, but sent out plenty of men to search for the missing men. Everyone was waiting for news. Han Yunxi didn't go to the medical academy immediately after arriving in Medical City, but was taken to an inn by Long Feiyi. It was the best cloud auspicious inn in Medical City, the Sky Room 1. From the window of the room, one could see the main doors of the medical academy. Currently, Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi were standing side by side in front of the window. Has there been no news from Jun Yixia's side? Han Yunxi was rather worried. Although there was no proof that Long Tianma hadn't been silenced, who knew if Jun Yixia would let him go? One more day without news from Long Tianma means you can rest for one more day. What's the rush? Long Feiyi retorted. They hadn't stopped the entire way here, but the number of words they'd exchanged could be counted on one hand. There didn't seem to be anything more or less between them. However, when he hugged her and held her hand, his strength seemed to be a lot tighter than before. She also felt a lot more natural and was no longer awkward. Didn't His Majesty only give Medical City 5 days' time? Han Yunxi asked next. Long Feiyi arched a brow at her with a cold smile. Aren't you overestimating Tianhui too much? The medical academy represented Medical City. Emperor Tianhui wouldn't be stupid enough to oppose Medical City for the sake of a deposed crown prince. Han Yunxi wasn't clear on the strength of Cloud Realm Continent's powers, but she was more concerned about Long Tianma's condition. Would he change after 5 days? After some hesitation, she said, I'd better not rest. Let's go to the medical academy. I have to see Gu Beiyue. Luo Zuishan wouldn't give her any answers, so she had to discuss things with Gu Beiyue first. Hearing this, Long Feiyi's eyes flashed with displeasure. Coldly, he said, I have something to do tonight, so I won't be going. What is it? Han Yunxi was puzzled. Was there anything more important than a consultation in Medical City? But Long Feiyi didn't answer her, but called for dinner instead. Chapter 233. The table was filled with delicacies and wine. Those who didn't know better would have thought that Long Fei Yi was entertaining someone in this room. Han Yunxi scanned the table of dishes and realized that many of them were dishes that she had never seen before. They looked, smelled, and tasted very tempting. However, there were at least 20 plates of dishes. Wasn't it a little too exaggerated for 2 people to eat? Is there anyone else coming? Tang Li? She asked suspiciously. No. Long Fei Yi was really a man of few words. Alright, this guy had been pampered since he was young. He was very particular about his food and clothing. Although he was out, he couldn't lower himself for a meal. Han Yunxi ignored this question and sat down opposite him. She ate casually and asked as she ate, "Is there anything else tonight? Will it take a long time?" It had been a few days, and there was no news from Long Tianmo or her. Gu Beiyue would be worried, especially about Long Tianmo's condition. He had to treat it carefully. After all, she and Gu Beiyue had made this trip for no other reason than to clear their names. Long Fei Yi looked up and glanced at the dishes in her bowl. He seemed a little unhappy, but he didn't show it. He rolled up his sleeves elegantly and poured wine casually. He didn't look like he had anything to do tonight. He only replied to Han Yunxi with 2 words, "Eat." Phew, the anxious Han Yunxi secretly sighed in her heart. He had time to enjoy delicious food and wine, but she didn't have time to accompany him. If it's not urgent, I'll go to the medical school first. She was very serious. She ate a few mouthfuls of food, put down her bowl and chopsticks, and stood up. Long Fei Ye's hand that was holding the wine cup suddenly tightened. If the porcelain cup wasn't hard enough, it would have cracked. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi didn't notice his hand. "I'm leaving." As she spoke, she turned around and left. Long Fei stared coldly at her retreating form, neither more nor less. Just as Han Yunxi was about to open the door, he opened his mouth. "Han Yunxi, how much do you know about the medical academy?" As soon as he said this, Han Yunxi immediately turned around. This was probably the first time that Long Fei Yi had talked to her about medical school. Could it be that this guy had something to do with the medical school? Since this guy who cherished his words as if they were gold had spoken, there must be something going on. Was he talking to her about the medical school because of Madame Tianqin? Otherwise, he had no reason to talk to her. She had always been investigating Madame Tianqin's background. She wanted to know why Madame Tianqin had concealed her identity and married Hong Kongin while pregnant. She wanted to know whether Madame Tianqin's difficult labor was an accident or if someone had plotted to kill her. She also wanted to know who her biological father was. From what she knew, Hong Kongin only had one clue. Madame Tianqin was related to the medical school and had the ability to get a director position for Hong Kongin. This matter was much more important than meeting Gu Beiyue. Not much. What do you want to say? Han Yunxi walked back and stood in front of Long Fei Yi, but Long Fei Yi was still as calm as ever. He wasn't anxious at all. Have you heard of the medical school's poison sect? Long Fei Yi asked. As expected, when this guy didn't talk about it, it was shocking. Medical school and poison sect, how could these 2 words be related? Han Yunxi was very surprised. Like a humble child, she quickly sat down and asked anxiously, how can there be a poison sect? Wasn't the medical school's only branch the medical sect? Didn't they only teach medical skills and train doctors to cure illnesses and save lives? Seeing Han Yunxi sit back down, Long Fei Ye's lips curved into a satisfied smile. The medical school once had 2 major sects, the medical sect and the poison sect. Their purpose was to save lives and do good deeds. Later on, the poison sect was destroyed and became a taboo in the medical school. Fewer and fewer people knew about it. Han Yunxi couldn't believe it. She'd always known that medicine and poison are one family, but never expected it to be true in the medical school. Why was it destroyed? Han Yunxi asked hastily. Someone who's good at treating poisons must also be good at using poisons, Long Feiyi said mildly. Han Yunxi was very familiar with these words. Once upon a time, Emperor Tianhui had taken note of her because of them. In the end, poison was a dangerous thing. Even if you didn't have the heart to use poison, others still wouldn't tolerate you. However, how could it be so easy to annihilate a sect? Since it was a sect, it had to have inviolable authority and powerful branches. For example, Medical City and Medicine City were both cities and sections. That was why even the imperial powers and empires feared them. How was the poison sect destroyed? Han Yunxi was very curious. It wasn't clear whether Long Feiyi really didn't know, or if he was faking it. In any case, he shook his head. Her curiosity was piqued, but it couldn't be satisfied. It was truly annoying. Han Yunxi pursed her lips and asked probingly, "Why, are you telling me all this?" She'd lied and claimed that Lady Tianxin had taught her poison skills. This guy wouldn't take it seriously and track her down to the medical school's poison sect, right? Faced with Han Yunxi's question, Long Feiyi fell silent. Why did he tell her all this? It seemed, he didn't have any ulterior motives other than chatting and not letting her leave. Just what is it? Han Yunxi asked curiously. Long Feiyi avoided her gaze and hesitated before saying, "There's a poison storehouse in the poison sect's forbidden grounds in Medical City. It's the most complete storehouse in the world. Perhaps you can find clues to unraveling the perplexing dreams there. That should be a reasonable explanation, right?" Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi's bright eyes dimmed at these words. Perplexing butterfly illusion was a poison that Han Yunxi had always carried with her. It was also the most troublesome poison that Han Yunxi had ever encountered. Even now, she hadn't been able to determine whether it was poisonous. After the last upgrade of the detoxification system, many new poisonous plants had grown out of the poison pool it had swallowed from Medicine City. Moreover, the detoxification system had also developed its own antidote. This was a huge leap forward for the detoxification system. Unfortunately, it wasn't of any help in unraveling the perplexing butterfly illusion. That small bottle of poison was just like its name, perplexing butterfly illusion. Han Yunxi took out the perplexing butterfly illusion from her medical pouch and sighed inwardly. She should have guessed that this guy wouldn't be so nice as to tell her about Lady Tianxin so frankly. Fine, she should have guessed that he wouldn't appear just to save her this time. He'd come from Medical City's poison storehouse. When would the relationship between her and this man become a little more pure? Was it because it wasn't pure that she always felt a sense of unfamiliarity when she was by his side? For a moment, Han Yunxi lost interest in the secrets of Medical City's poison sect. She stood up and smiled faintly. "Your Highness, no matter how urgent the matter of the perplexing butterfly illusion is, it'll have to wait until Gu Beiyue and I have cleared our names. I have to make a trip to the medical academy." "Excuse me." Long Feiyi hadn't expected Han Yunxi to react this way. He asked unhappily, "It's the middle of the night. What's so urgent?" Han Yunxi was delighted and her smile grew even brighter. "Your Highness, of course it's urgent. This concubine has to discuss the Crown Prince's condition with Imperial Physician Gu to prevent any possibility of his illness developing. If that happens and there's trouble during the consultation, how can this concubine go to the poison storehouse with you with a guilty body?" Long Feiyi's expression changed when he heard this. It was rare to see him lose control and panic. However, he hesitated to speak, his handsome face turning cold. He didn't say anything, so she took his silence as a tacit agreement. I'm leaving. Han Yunshi elegantly turned to leave. The medical academy isn't a place you can enter as you please. Long Feiyi finally spoke up. This concubine can enter as long as I tell you my name. Your Highness doesn't need to wait for this concubine to return. Han Yunshi didn't turn back. Her words meant that she wouldn't be returning to the inn after revealing her whereabouts. This prince said that you're not allowed to leave because I have something to do tonight, Long Feiyi said in a low voice. What is it? Please speak, Your Highness. Han Yunshi finally turned around. What is it? What is it? Long Feiyi's frosty expression turned even colder, but he didn't reply for a long time. Your Highness, please speak, Han Yunshi took a few steps forward and asked seriously. Although she was still angry, she still took his business seriously. However, Long Feiyi just stared at her without saying a word. What does this guy want? Is he playing with me? If it's not something important, this concubine, unexpectedly, before Han Yunshi could finish speaking, Long Feiyi interrupted her. Yes, serve me in bed tonight. What? Han Yunshi didn't even have time to close her mouth. She was so shocked that she froze on the spot, flabbergasted and unmoving. Tonight, there's something, serve him in bed tonight. Han Yunshi didn't know how long it took her to digest Long Feiyi's words. In any case, when she came back to her senses, Long Feiyi was still sitting in front of her, looking at her coldly. She tried very hard to move the corners of her mouth, trying to make herself smile. However, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't smile. She could only ask stiffly, Your Highness, this joke isn't funny at all. Does this prince look like he's joking with you? After Long Feiyi finished speaking, he stood up. Looking at his proud and tall figure, Han Yunshi still felt oppressed even though they were 5 or 6 steps away. Your Highness, you really know how to joke. Han Yunshi unconsciously took a few steps back. Long Feiyi raised his eyebrows and asked, You still want to leave? Your Highness, this concubine just happened to be unlucky these few days. It's not convenient for me to serve you in bed. How about? Han Yunshi herself felt that this excuse was very lame. Very soon, Long Fei cut him off. Then you can keep watch. Keep watch, this was the job of a maidservant or concubine. She had to guard under the bed and accompany him in bed at the door. She was the official consort. How could she do such a thing? At this moment, Han Yunshi didn't care so much. As long as it wasn't serving him in bed, she could accept it. Her wildly thumping heart finally slowed down. Han Yunshi also calmed down. What was this man trying to do? Was he deliberately looking for trouble? This didn't seem like his style at all. After a moment of silence, the atmosphere seemed to be less tense. Han Yunshi also calmed down. She gathered her courage and said very seriously and sincerely, Long Feiyi, if you really don't have anything important to say, then let me go. I want to go see Luo Zuishan with Gu Beiyue. Unexpectedly, Long Feiyi's icy expression didn't change. He threw her a sentence, This prince is sleepy. You can keep watch under the bed tonight. She wasn't sure if it was because they were too close, but she felt like she was dreaming in the middle of the night and turning her head to see the person next to her. Hey, she quietly probed. After waiting for a long time, she saw that Long Feiyi didn't respond. Like a thief, she carefully moved closer to him and looked at his features. In the darkness, she could even see that his eyelashes were very long. She had the urge to reach out and touch them. Is he really asleep? She muttered to herself and moved back a little. She quietly leaned on the edge of the bed and looked at him. As she looked, her lips unconsciously curled. However, it didn't take long for her smile to fade away. It was replaced by a frown and a look of resentment. How much did it take to fall in love with someone and be so worried about personal gains and losses? How many out of 10 could there be? Long Fei, is there anyone in this world that you can treat with sincerity without any ulterior motives? Long Fei, do you know what love is? Han Yunqi asked faintly. She then turned around and sat back down. Forget it, let's sleep. At this moment, Long Fei slowly opened his eyes. His deep eyes were filled with complex emotions. The next morning, Han Yunqi woke up in a daze and found that she was sleeping on the bed. Long Fei was leaning on the rocking chair by the window, opening the secret letter. When did she fall asleep? When did this guy wake up? How did she end up on the bed? Seeing Long Fei looking over, Han Yunqi pursed her lips. Morning. Long Fei just nodded. The moment he opened his mouth, he gave her a piece of explosive news. Long Tianma was sent to the medical school. Really? Han Yunqi was so shocked that she almost fell. When did this happen? Last night. I personally went over and confirmed that it was him, Long Fei answered truthfully. As soon as he said this, Han Yunqi was shocked again. Didn't you fall asleep last night? Long Fei was unperturbed. It was as if he was talking about the weather. Who told you that I fell asleep? What did he mean by this? Could it be that he knew everything she did and said last night? He pretended to be asleep. Long Fei, you're actually a bastard. Han Yunqi's originally cold face instantly turned red. She hurriedly avoided Long Fei's gaze and got off the bed. I'm going to the medical school. Her clothes and hair were all messy. She didn't care about them and directly rushed out. Long Fei stopped her in time. Long Tianma's stomach is gone, what? Han Yunqi exclaimed. Her red cheeks turned pale. His stomach was gone. Was it cured or was it diseased? If it was cured and there were no symptoms left for consultation, Shi Yuba could say that it was the effect of his treatment. If it was diseased, then how confident was Luo Zuishan? She had never fought a battle that she wasn't sure of. This was the first time she didn't know anything about the patient's condition. Seeing Han Yunqi's anxious look, Long Fei said lightly, it's very likely that Jun Yixie did something. Be careful. I will always be in Medical City. After he finished speaking, he left before Han Yunqi. He would always be in Medical City, so she didn't have to be afraid. The anxious Han Yunqi didn't realize how rare Long Fei's words were. She also left in a hurry. At this time, there was another person who was even more anxious than Han Yunqi. It was none other than Luo Zuishan, who was previously full of confidence. Gu had promised him that he would tell him the truth about Long Tianma's big belly as soon as he arrived at the medical school, and that he would definitely help him defeat Shi Yuba. But now, Long Tianma's disease had changed. Since the middle of the night last night, he had been looking for Gu like a madman. Finally, this morning, he found him on the roof of his courtyard. Luo Zuishan climbed up the ladder and personally pulled Gu down. Stinking brat, old man's decades of reputation is about to be completely destroyed in your hands, and you're still sleeping. Gu let him pull him until he was about to fall. Then, he turned over and flew down. Despite landing on the ground, Gu Qishao's face was still drowsy. He stretched lazily and said, it's just the title of director. If you like, I'll kill the medical academy's old academy head in the future and you'll be the academy head. These words shocked Luo Zuishan so much that he hurriedly stepped forward to cover his mouth. Ancestor, please spare my old bones, okay? Okay. Gu answered happily, but a gloomy coldness flashed across his lips, as if he was full of hatred for the medical school. What do you think we should do now? Long Tianma's disease has changed, and his stomach is gone. Hurry up and take a look. How could Luo Zuishan not be worried? If Gu couldn't understand the disease, he would be done for in the consultation. That person must be a fake. Shi Yuba didn't do anything, so his stomach can't be gone. Gu was very sure. He didn't care whether Long Tianma came or not. What he cared about was where Han Yunxi was. They were both kidnapped, and since Long Tianma was sent here, he should at least send Han Yunxi here too. How can you be sure it's a fake? Stinking brat, what's going on with Long Tianma's stomach? What did Shi Yuba do? Tell me, Luo Zuishan urged. Gu impatiently glanced at him, too lazy to answer. Just as he was about to leave, Luo Zuishan immediately grabbed him and said sternly, Chief, if you don't tell me, do you think I won't tell the head elder that you're back? Gu suddenly narrowed his eyes, a dangerous expression on his face. You wouldn't dare. What's going on? Are you going to tell me or not? Luo Zuishan was so angry that his beard was about to catch fire. At this time, the voice of a medical apprentice came from outside the courtyard. Luo Zuishan was still holding on to Gu tightly. Seeing that the people outside were about to come in, Gu whispered in Luo Zuishan's ear, Gu, Shi Yuba planted a Gu. As soon as he said this, Luo Zuishan's hand went limp. Gu struggled free and disappeared in a flash. Gu, Luo Zuishan was so shocked that his heart raced. Gu. It had been a long, long time since anyone had mentioned it. He knew about Gu, but he didn't know how to do it. He didn't expect Shi Yuba to know. No wonder Gu was so sure that the Long Tianma sent here was a fake. Shi Yuba's Gu could generally only be removed by Shi Yuba himself, unless he encountered a Gu expert. And in this world, there shouldn't be any other Gu expert besides Gu, right? Gu clearly knew that Shi Yuba had planted a Gu, but he actually wanted to have a public consultation. One had to know that Gu was the biggest taboo in medical school. This guy definitely had a scheme for returning to medical school this time. What did he want to do? Luo Zuishan's mind was a mess. He didn't know how to deal with it. At this time, a young medical apprentice came in. Director Luo, Qin Wangfei has arrived. The Council of Elders has invited her in. What? Han Yunxi had also arrived. Why didn't this lass appear earlier or later? Why did she have to appear now? The Long Tianma had arrived, and so had Han Yunxi. The consultation naturally had to begin immediately. Director Luo, the Council of Elders doesn't wait for anyone. Please go ahead, the medical apprentice reminded in a low voice. Luo Zuishan looked in the direction Gu disappeared, his old tears running freely in his heart. Could this guy Gu be a bit more reliable? What should he do now? How could he prove that the Long Tianma sent here was a fake? Director Luo, the medical apprentice urged again. Luo Zuishan had no choice but to brace himself and head to the Elders' Hall. At the Elders' Hall, Qin Wangrong, Shi Yuba, and Gu Beiyue had already arrived. As soon as they saw Han Yunxi come in, Qin Wangrong immediately stepped forward and questioned, Han Yunxi, who kidnapped you? How did you come back? Han Yunxi naturally wanted to expose Jun Yixie, but after thinking about it, she decided to leave Jun Yixie's weakness for future use. She sighed and replied, I fainted. When I woke up, I was already in Medical City. As she spoke, Luo Zuishan came in, and the other elders also came over. Chapter 235. As soon as he heard that the elders had arrived, Qin Wangrong was the first to rise and greet them. If these elders were to be placed in the empire, they would be first-rank officials. They were one level lower than the king, who was second only to one person and above tens of thousands of people. Han Yunxi smiled coldly in her heart. Long Fei Yi was right after all. Emperor Tianhui still didn't have the power to threaten Medical City. Long Tianma's disappearance had left Emperor Tianhui furious, demanding an explanation from Medical City. Now that Long Tianma had been sent back for no reason, the Medical Academy hadn't given them any explanation. Instead, the proud Qin Wangrong had lowered himself first. But after careful consideration, it wasn't that Qin Wangrong lacked backbone. After all, Medical City's power was truly frightening. The three great clans of the Medical Academy and Medicine City controlled all of Cloud Realm Continent's medical industry. They had the power to decide the life and death of any doctor. In other words, these two powers controlled the lives of all the people in the world. A single illness could claim a person's life, whether it was a lofty emperor or a lowly slave. A single plague could destroy a battalion of soldiers, a city, or even a country. If the three great empires of Cloud Realm Continent could win over Medical City and Medicine City, they'd surpass the other empires and become the true overlords of Cloud Realm Continent. From another perspective, the consequences of offending Medical City and Medicine City were easy to imagine. Of the 5 elders of the Medical Academy, only 3 had come this time. In Han Yunxi's impression, elders were usually old men with white hair and ruddy complexions. They had the air of a transcendent being, but of the 3 people who came in, 2 were men and 1 was a woman. Only one of them was an old man, while the other 2 could only be considered middle-aged. The old man had a white beard, his features benevolent, like an amiable old immortal. The middle-aged man had a stern expression and didn't smile at all. The middle-aged woman was dressed smartly and had good looks. It was obvious at a glance that she was a formidable woman. Why are their elders even younger than the directors? Han Yunxi asked in a low voice. That old man is 3rd Elder Shinjueming, one of the 3 sage doctors of the Medical Academy. The other 2 are 4th Elder Li Tianxi, a member of the medical primogeniture like the 2 directors. The other is 5th Elder Lady Lianxin. When Gu Beiyue finished his introduction, he lowered his voice even more. Madame Lianxin is a godly doctor. In the Medical Academy, there were 2 major systems. One was the administrative management system, which consisted of directors, council of elders, vice deans, and academy deans. Different ranks held different levels of power in the Medical Academy. The second was the medical skill hierarchy, which was the basis of all of Cloud Realm Continent's medical community. From low to high, there were 9 ranks: medical apprentice, medical scholar, medical doctor, medical grand doctor, divine doctor, medical ancestor, medical sage, immortal doctor, and sovereign doctor. Luo Zuishan and Shi Yubo were both medical ancestor level figures. They were both directors and belonged to the management. Gu Beiyue's medical skills were at the level of a divine doctor, but he had yet to enter a medical school. Generally speaking, those who were skilled in medicine also had high authority. However, there was actually an elder at the level of a godly doctor in the Elders Guild. It seemed that the Medical Academy was not a place where strength was the only thing that mattered. This Lady Lianxin should be an exception. Looking at Lady Lianxin, Han Yunxi couldn't help but think of Han Kongan. Han Kongan's medical skills were at the level of a godly doctor, but he was also a director. This was the exception that Lady Tianxin had given him. Just what kind of exceptions were allowed in the Medical Academy's administrative system? Why was she able to enter the Council of Elders? Han Yunxi asked hastily. I'm not sure about that. I only know that she's the daughter of Medicine City's Mu clan, Gu Beiyue replied honestly. Han Yunxi was lost in thought. The Long Fei Yi had relied on Medicine City's Wang clan to find out much about the Medical Academy. It looked like the higher-ups of the Medical Academy still gave face to the 3 great clans of Medicine City. Aside from the 3 great clans of Medicine City, what other powers would the Medical Academy give face to? Could it be that Lady Tianxin came from Medicine City as well? Han Yunxi was lost in her thoughts when Lady Lianxin looked over. You're Lady Tianqin and Han Konggan's daughter? Han Yunxi was surprised. That's this junior. Fifth elder knows my mother. But Lady Lianqin was especially arrogant. I've only heard of her. She had no intention of continuing the topic, but simply went straight to the point. She explained the details of the consultation in a concise and comprehensive manner. This was a public consultation held in the consultation hall of the Council of Elders. The 3 elders would be in charge of the consultation, while Luo Zuishan and Shi Yubao could only watch from the sidelines. If they had any doubts, they could raise them for discussion after the consultation concluded. Although Lady Lianqin was the lowest-ranked elder, she seemed to be the one in charge. The other 2 elders hadn't opened their mouths since entering the room. Tianning's crown prince is already in the consultation hall. Everyone, please. Lady Lianqin rose to her feet as soon as she finished speaking. The other 2 elders and Qin Wangrong rose at the same time, but no one else seemed to have any intention of leaving. Everyone knew that Long Tianma's stomach was gone. Han Yunxi had been discussing the matter with Gu Beiyue for a long time. She had no clue about Long Tianma's relapse to begin with. Now that they hadn't seen him or felt his pulse, they had no idea where to start. The 2 of them stared at Luo Zuishan, hoping to see the same self-confidence on his face. Unfortunately, Luo Zuishan wasn't his usual confident self. Instead, he was knitting his brows with a heavy heart. Shi Yubao, on the other hand, had his head bowed. His entire person seemed to have dimmed considerably. Director Shi, let's go, Qin Wangrong urged in a low voice. He could tell that Shi Yubao was uneasy. Last night, he and Shi Yubao had gone to see Long Tianma's stomach. He'd asked him again and again about the state of the illness, whether it was cured or diseased. Shi Yubao hadn't given him a direct answer. Shi Yubao glanced at Qin Wangrong as if he wanted to say something, but Qin Wangrong didn't object and held back. The 3 elders and Qin Wangrong remained standing while the others remained seated. The room was silent as the atmosphere suddenly turned strange. What, do the 2 directors have something else to say? Lady Lianqin asked with a frown. Luo Zuishan was about to speak when Shi Yubao spoke up at the same time. 5th elder, as soon as the other spoke, they all fell silent. Just what's going on? Lady Lianqin didn't have much patience, so the other 2 elders sat back down. Shi Yubao looked at Luo Zuishan, and Luo Zuishan looked at Shi Yubao. Both of them had ulterior motives and didn't speak for a long time. Director Luo, you were the one who proposed the consultation. If you have something to say, say it first, Lady Lianqin ordered. Luo Zuishan's heart was filled with grievances. He hadn't proposed the consultation, okay? He'd been forced. Gu had said that Long Tianma was fake, so Long Tianma had to be fake. With a fake Long Tianma for a consultation, and a public one at that, only the heavens knew what kind of trouble this matter would cause. No matter what kind of trouble it caused, not to mention the matter of the Gu, even if it was a public consultation, the medical school's reputation might be damaged. As the person who proposed the consultation, he couldn't escape responsibility. Han Yunxi saw Luo Zuishan's hesitant appearance and her heart grew cold. It seemed that Long Tianma's illness was out of Luo Zuishan's control. Shi Yubao was going to win. Luo Zuishan. Lady Lianqin was enraged. She was a full 30 years younger than Luo Zuishan and had inferior medical skills, but her status was still there. Her anger still intimidated Luo Zuishan. Elders, let's postpone the consultation. I suspect that Tianning's crown prince is a fake, Luo Zuishan finally spoke up. Everyone was stunned by his words, but Qin Wangrong was the most shocked. He grew anxious. What's going on? What right do you have to say that? Han Yunxi looked at Gu Beiyue in disbelief. Gu Beiyue was also looking at her, making the 2 of them even more confused. Luo Zuishan, what do you mean by those words? Third elder finally spoke up. His stomach, it's just that judging from the crown prince's condition, it's impossible for his stomach to go down in a few days, Luo Zuishan explained without much confidence. As long as he told them about the goo, third elder would definitely believe him. But he couldn't say it. For one thing, the real Long Tianma wasn't here, so he had no proof. For another, he didn't dare say it in public. Although he didn't have much confidence, Luo Zuishan's explanation was still acceptable. A fake? Han Yunxi finally began to think things over. Long Fei Yi had warned her that Jun Yixia would do something to the Long Tianma. Perhaps Jun Yixia hadn't done anything to the real thing, but sent over a fake instead. As old man sees it, whether or not the crown prince's stomach can go down in such a short time is a question we should discuss during the consultation, third elder said as he glanced at Shi Yuba. Logically speaking, Shi Yuba should have jumped out to refute Luo Zuishan's words. He had more right to speak about the Long Tianma's stomach. But Shi Yuba was very quiet right now. Unlike his calm exterior, his heart had long been restless. Why was Luo Zuishan so certain that the Long Tianma he'd sent over was a fake? Did he know he'd planted goo? Impossible. Luo Zuishan knew about the goo arts, but he definitely didn't know how to use them, nor could he tell. He'd only learned a bit of them by chance. Seeing Shi Yuba's silence, third elder lost his patience. Someone come, immediately arrange for a consultation. At these words, Shi Yuba couldn't sit still any longer. Hold it. I also suspect that the Tianning Crown Prince sent over is a fake. Director Luo's words are reasonable. There's no way the Tianning Crown Prince's stomach could go down in such a short time. Goo could only be dispelled by experts in the field of goo. Aside from himself, no one else could dispel the goo arts he'd planted. If he wanted to believe that a goo arts expert still existed in this world, he might as well believe that the Long Tianma lying in the consultation hall right now was an imposter. How could he have any chance of winning against a fake crown prince? Heaven knows if Han Yunxi and the rest were putting on a show to get an imposter to come in for the consultation. Shi Yuba's words shocked the crowd even more. Could it be that the Long Tianma really was a fake? How could it be a fake? That's clearly a mo. Qin Wang Rong didn't believe it. For the sake of caution, why don't we postpone the consultation? Shi Yuba suggested. It was rare for him to be on the same side as Luo Zuishan. How do we test whether it's real or fake? Han Yunxi murmured. Gu Beiyue could only shake his head. Whether it was real or fake, this matter was completely beyond anyone's control. Should they postpone it or not? Was it real or fake? While everyone was exchanging glances in the silent room, a medical apprentice ran in to report, Third Elder, Tianning's crown prince has woken up. The unconscious Long Tianma had finally woken up. Chapter 236. Long Tianma had woken up. It was not easy to determine if an unconscious person was real or fake, but now that he was awake, things became much simpler. Lead the way, this prince will know if he is real or fake after asking. Prince Rong was very anxious. The person present who understood Long Tianma the most was none other than Prince Rong, and whether Long Tianma was real or fake, he was the one who had the most say. Everyone hurried towards the consultation hall. The public consultation had been postponed, and Long Tianma was sent to a room in the rear courtyard of the consultation hall. Unexpectedly, before everyone reached the courtyard, they heard Long Tianma's mournful cries. Everyone was greatly alarmed and quickened their steps. However, Han Yunxi suddenly stopped. Seeing this, Gu Beiyue also stopped and asked in a low voice, "What's wrong?" Han Yunxi did not speak. Her eyes drooped, looking very focused, but no one knew what was wrong with her. Nothing. She stopped for a while before continuing to walk. In the courtyard, Prince Rong had already anxiously pushed open the door and rushed in. Inside the room, Long Tianma was actually rolling on the bed, his brocade white clothes soaked in sweat. His face was pale without any blood, and his expression was sinister and terrifying, as if he was enduring some unbearable pain. "Mor. Mor." Prince Rong strode to the bed. No matter how he called out, Long Tianma did not respond. He did not even notice that Prince Rong was beside him. He was actually not awake. His eyes opened and closed for a while, and he constantly let out meaningless wails. The wails gradually weakened, revealing an aura of powerlessness and despair. "What's going on?" Lady Lianxin sternly questioned the medical assistant. Not long after he woke up, he cried out in pain, and then he became like this. After a while, he was in so much pain that he couldn't speak. The medical assistant hurriedly replied. "Pain." At this time, whether the person was real or fake was not the most important thing. Saving someone was more important. Everyone present, except for Prince Rong, was a doctor. Although they could not diagnose what was wrong, they could all see that Long Tianma's situation was not optimistic. There was a limit to how much pain a human body could endure. It was not unheard of for someone to die from pain. The third elder didn't say anything. He strode forward to check Long Tianma's pulse. With third elder's appearance, the people behind him could all rest. Third elder was a 7th-rank sage doctor, one of the only 3 in the medical academy, or even in Cloud Realm continent. Although there was only a single rank between them, that was enough to leave Luo Zuishin and Shi Yuba in the dust. Silence reigned in the room as everyone watched anxiously. Han Yunqi stood on the far right, her arms crossed as she leaned against the wall. Ever since she'd entered the room, her gaze had been sweeping over Long Tianma's body without stopping. However, she didn't know that when she stared at Long Tianma, Gu Beiyue's gaze never left her. Heaven knows how much pain Long Tianma was in. Just then, he had been rolling and waving his arms non-stop, but now his movements were slowing down as if he didn't have much strength left. But just as third elder was about to take his hand, he suddenly flung it aside as if he was filled with energy again. He began to roll and struggle with all his might. Third elder clasped his hands together and stopped. Seeing this, Qinhuang Rong hastily stepped forward and pressed down on Long Tianma's arm. Unexpectedly, his action seemed to hurt Long Tianma, who abruptly waved his hand with even more force and strength. He actually managed to grab Qinhuang Rong's arm and force him to retreat a few steps. Prince Rong was a military general, so his hand strength wasn't weak. But Long Tianma was a martial arts practitioner, so his hand strength couldn't be underestimated either. Prince Rong was about to step forward when third elder ordered sternly, "Don't touch him again. Give him the anesthetic soup, a large dose, quickly." A medical sage was a medical sage. Even a medical apprentice wasn't qualified to be third elder's assistant. 5th-rank divine Dr. Madame Lianxin personally prepared the medicine. Who knew that at this moment, Han Yunqi, who had been silent all this time, spoke up, "Third elder, you're wrong. You absolutely can't." Once these words came out, everyone looked over. Third elder, who was denied, didn't seem happy. But as a person of virtue and prestige, he didn't reveal any emotions. Instead, he looked at Han Yunqi thoughtfully. Madame Lianxin didn't have such a good temper. Her gaze was filled with disgust and impatience. "Han Yunqi, what nonsense are you talking about? Can't you see that the situation is urgent? Why are you adding to the chaos?" Han Yunqi walked over with a serious face. Even the anesthetic soup can't calm him down, let alone stop the pain. He's been poisoned, a very strong poison. Due to her professional habit, her voice was always cold when facing an illness. Her entire person was like an authority, exuding a seriousness that couldn't be disobeyed. Gu Beiyue had long been used to Han Yunxi being like this. What he liked the most was her confident and solemn appearance. However, everyone in the medical academy was dumbfounded, including the medical apprentice at the side. What did this woman say? Was she denying Third Elder's judgment? Where did her confidence come from? Poisoned. You didn't even take his pulse. What nonsense are you talking about? Madame Lianxin immediately rebuked. The confidence in Han Yunxi's eyes was especially irksome to her. Madame Lianxin had only seen 2 situations where a diagnosis was made without even taking the pulse. The first was a very common illness, such as a cold, a fall, or an injury. Usually, an experienced doctor would be able to diagnose and prescribe medicine after asking a few questions. The second was when she saw the head of the medical academy. The head of the medical academy was an 8th-ranked divine doctor. He could diagnose many illnesses without taking the pulse, and he had never made a mistake. What was Han Yunxi's situation? Not to mention taking the pulse, she didn't even ask for a diagnosis. I'm not talking nonsense. Third Elder, if you don't believe me, you can feel his wrist joints. Han Yunxi directly swept past Madame Lianxin and looked at Third Elder with clear eyes. It wasn't that she was arrogant, but this time, it just so happened that they had bumped into her field of expertise. In terms of medical skills, she was at most a 3rd-ranked doctor, the lowest rank present. However, in terms of poison skills, she was an authority. Today, even if the head of the medical academy was present, she was still an authority. Just now, before she entered the courtyard, her detoxification system had already detected the poison. It had given her a big fright because the poison detected was bone poison. Bone poison was a poison that she had named herself. The reason why she had named it was because it was a completely new type of poison. It was grown from the poison pool in her detoxification system. The most frightening part of this poison was that it acted on a person's bones and joints. Once poisoned, all the joints, big and small, would not be spared. Thinking back to when she had first discovered this new poison, Han Yunxi had been so shocked that she broke out in a cold sweat. She hadn't expected that someone would be poisoned. The person who had poisoned him was ruthless enough, and the poison was strong enough. Before Han Yunxi had entered the room, she had already known that the person who had been poisoned was Long Tianmo. She was also very certain that the Long Tianmo in the room was real. Because in this world, other than her, only Jun Yixia would be able to use this kind of poison. From the looks of it, Jun Yixia had fished up the poison materials from the poison pool in the medicinal herbs forest. Long Fei Ye's reminder was right. Jun Yixia would not let Long Tianmo go for nothing. He had done something to Long Tianmo's body. Third Elder looked at Han Yunxi, but didn't pay attention to what she had said. After all, in his eyes, Han Yunxi couldn't even be considered a doctor. However, the aura of authority that Han Yunxi exuded made him hesitate. This kind of natural aura of a doctor and the aura of authority could only be seen on the head of the medical academy. Who would have thought that a woman like her would have it? Just now, Lady Lianxin had said that this girl's mother was Lady Tianxin. Why did he feel that the name Lady Tianxin sounded a little familiar? Seeing that Third Elder didn't respond, Han Yunxi added, "Third Elder, just because he can't feel pain, it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt anymore. For example, if a person was injured and the wound was inflamed and very painful, if the wound wasn't treated and the person's nerves were numbed so that he couldn't feel pain, the wound would still be inflamed and continue to worsen. Mephisan could make Long Tianmo unconscious so that he wouldn't feel pain, but his joints would be in a constant state of pain. If it was just ordinary pain and inflammation, it wouldn't be a big deal. The key point was that Long Tianmo had been poisoned, and it wasn't an ordinary poison. Just because he couldn't feel pain, it didn't mean that it didn't hurt anymore. third elder finally paid attention to Han Yunqi's words. He stroked his beard thoughtfully with a cautious expression, but still didn't say anything. At this time, Lady Lianxin couldn't bear it any longer. Han Yunqi, have you had enough? Can you bear the responsibility for delaying the treatment? The poison he's been poisoned with is called bone poison. Once he uses mephisin, the medicine and poison will react, and the poison will mutate. At that time, no one will be able to detoxify the poison. Can you bear the responsibility? Han Yunqi wasn't polite at all. Why are you so sure that he's been poisoned? Lady Lianxin was truly inconceivable. Heaven knew where this woman's confidence came from. At this time, Han Yunqi disliked paying attention to people like Lady Lianxin the most. Her attitude was serious and sincere. Third elder, feel the crown prince's wrist. You'll understand the truth. Although third elder wasn't a poison doctor, he could still feel that something was wrong with such a deeply poisoned wrist. Helpless, Han Yunqi thought of the matter too simply. Although this wasn't a public consultation, there were still many people present. How could third elder easily listen to her? If by any chance he felt the wrist and confirmed that it was poisoned, where would third elder put his old face? Could it be that he had to admit that his previous decision was wrong? That he, a dignified medical sage, was inferior to a little girl who was still wet behind her ears? Of course, third elder still had medical ethics. Long Tianma's condition was urgent and couldn't be delayed for too long. Just as third elder was about to speak, fourth elder, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke. Second elder is an authority in orthopedics. Why don't we invite second elder over? This, fourth elder's words were undoubtedly questioning third elder. Moreover, second elder and third elder had always been at odds. If second elder was invited, wouldn't there be one more person to laugh at? Originally, third elder was about to give in. When he heard this, anger rose from his heart, and his displeasure appeared on his face. Old man has been practicing medicine for so many years and has never needed anyone to interrupt. Lianxin, why aren't you quickly bringing the mephisin soup? You're not allowed. Han Yunqi was also angry, and her voice was as cold as ice. Chapter 237. Not allowed. Han Yunqi's not allowed was sonorous and forceful enough to silence the entire room. Even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. Who would have thought that this seemingly weak little girl would actually have such guts? Han Yunqi, you've got guts. Do you know who you're speaking to? Lady Lianxin was the first to recover her wits and rebuke her loudly. No matter how well-mannered third elder was, he couldn't stand such provocation. Only the head of the medical academy could order him around in such a tone. This Han Yunqi was simply unforgivable. Qin Wangfei, old man didn't bicker with you just then for the sake of the Duke of Qin. Don't reach for a yard after getting an inch. No one expected the Long Fei Yi to have such face in the Council of Elders. Of course, Han Yunqi couldn't care less right now. When faced with patients, she only had one goal, to save them as quickly as possible. Even if she didn't want to save them, she wanted to fight for the dignity of her own words. In this world, no matter where you went, it wasn't easy to get people to take your words, opinions, and judgment seriously, remember, and trust them. Thus, there was a saying that strength spoke louder than words. Han Yunqi raised her chin and looked coldly at third elder. Third elder, you're not checking Tianning's crown prince's joints. Could it be that you're afraid? Are you afraid that you're really wrong? You're impudent. Third elder flew into a rage and slapped the table. Someone come, drag this uneducated girl out for old man. From now on, she's not allowed to take half a step into Medical City. This girl, how was her crimes unforgivable? She just lacked a lesson. If he didn't teach her a lesson, she really wouldn't know what kind of place the medical academy was. As soon as Third Elder finished speaking, the attendants from outside entered the room. Seeing this, Gu Beiyue spoke up. Third Elder, it won't be too late to kick her out after you've examined the Crown Prince's joints. Otherwise, people might say that you're bullying the younger generation. The atmosphere was tense with swords drawn, but Gu Beiyue remained as calm and quiet as ever. He spoke unhurriedly and gently. However, the words he spoke carried a deeper meaning. It was as if there was a needle hidden in silk floss, and it had a reassuring force. These words left Third Elder with no reason to refuse. He glared angrily at Gu Beiyue. He hadn't expected that Gu Beiyue, who had always been clean and honest, would speak up for Han Yunxi in the medical school. Third Elder, in my opinion, Imperial Physician Gu's words make sense. We shouldn't let others think that we, the Council of Elders, are looking down on the Duke of Qin's mansion. Fourth Elder spoke up again. Only then did Han Yunxi realize that her every word and action represented the man behind her, Long Fei Yi. Thinking of this, she could not help but wonder where Long Fei Yi was at this moment. Are they looking for the poison sex storehouse in the medical academy? Does he know what happened in the medical school? Right now, the busy Long Fei Yi was sitting on the roof, watching everything unfold with an expressionless face. Seeing that Third Elder didn't immediately refuse, Han Yunxi hastened to say, Third Elder, you don't need to chase me away. If Tianning's Crown Prince isn't poisoned, I'll leave Medical City on my own and never set foot inside again. If, Third Elder cut her off disdainfully. There's no if. He, very good. You won't shed tears until you see the coffin, huh? Old man, let's examine Long Tianma's wrist joint right now. Third Elder's previous hesitation wasn't because he believed that Long Tianma had been poisoned, but because he was hesitant to use such large doses of numbing powder. Although he didn't specialize in poisons, he knew quite a bit about them. Long Tianma's complexion didn't look like he'd been poisoned, much less hypertoxic. His decades of experience couldn't possibly compare to a little girl like Han Yunxi's eyesight. Seeing that Third Elder was about to examine Tianning, Han Yunxi hastily called out, Wait a minute. What, is it old man who's afraid, or are you? Third Elder seized the chance to retort sarcastically. Only those who are afraid won't dare to talk terms. Han Yunxi's eyes flashed with an undetectable craftiness. If she didn't take advantage of a situation like this, she wouldn't be Han Yunxi. When it came to poisons, those who didn't trust her would have to pay the price. What a glib tongue, humph. Third Elder scorned. If Tianning's Crown Prince has been poisoned, then I'd like to ask Third Elder to agree to do something for this junior. Han Yunxi seized the chance to state her conditions. She had no connections at all in Medical City, so it'd be best if she could use this chance to gain the favor of an elder. Of course, she was 100% certain that Tianning had been poisoned. As for whether Third Elder would agree, she wasn't so sure. Unexpectedly, Third Elder's reaction exceeded her expectations. Qin Wangfei, he said, that's not how you negotiate terms. Then how do we negotiate? Surprise was surprise, but Han Yunxi was confident enough not to be afraid. Third Elder stroked his beard and said slowly, If old man cures Tianning's Crown Prince, then you'll get lost from the medical community. What a harsh condition, but Han Yunxi wasn't afraid. She wore a smile on her face as she nodded cheerfully. Third Elder gave a cold snort before continuing, If you cure Tianning's Crown Prince, then what do you want old man to do? Just say the word. This, Third Elder's method of negotiation was completely different from Han Yunxi's. Cure him. Ignore the diagnosis and only look at the results. As long as he was cured. Now that he'd calmed down, Third Elder's shrewd side finally showed itself. To Han Yunxi, curing him was the same as curing him of the poison. That was her strong suit. But Han Yunshi's heart gave a lurch at these words. Oh no! She was 100% certain that Long Tianma had been poisoned, but curing the poison, fine, forgive her for not seriously considering the problem just then. To cure the poison, she needed an antidote. Even if she used acupuncture to expel the poison, she still needed an antidote. Otherwise, it would be impossible to expel such a large amount of the poison. But the antidote, at this moment, Han Yunshi wished she could slap herself a few times. Bone poison was a completely new poison, and the detox system had yet to create an antidote for it. It was easy for the detox system's poison pawn to create new poisons, but it took time to create an antidote. It could take a month or two at the least, or a year or so at the most. It wasn't that Han Yunshi was negligent, but that she was too used to it. As long as the detox system diagnosed a poison, it could cure it. Even if it didn't have the antidote in reserve, it knew the formula. Thus, she didn't need to think too much. When she needed an antidote, the detox system would provide it. But this time, Han Yunshi had fallen for it. She'd fallen for the detox system she was so proud of. How is it, Qin Wangfei? Third elder was waiting for an answer. Han Yunshi lightly bit her lip as she hesitated. Actually, there was no point in hesitating. She was very clear on the situation. Without an antidote, there was no way to cure Long Tianma for now. Long Tianma, on the other hand, had been poisoned. If things dragged on for too long, he'd die in vain from the pain. Qin Wangfei, you came this time for a consultation to diagnose Tianning's Crown Prince's illness, as well as to clear your name of misdiagnosis. How about this, we'll dispense with the consultation. We'll have everyone present as witnesses. The time limit is 3 days. Old man will allow you to treat Tianning's Crown Prince first. I hope you can clearly explain the pain from his stomach and give us a conclusion. Heavens, this didn't just require a cure, but a clear understanding of both the relapse and the current pathological changes. As expected, he wasn't an elder of the medical academy for nothing. He was ruthless and formidable. Under these circumstances, what was Han Yunshi supposed to do? If she agreed, there was no way she could do it. If she didn't, Third Elder would never let her off even if she wasn't afraid of losing face. He'd never let her take a single step into Medical City. If news of this spread, she'd become the world's laughingstock. Han Yunshi was caught between a rock and a hard place. Qin Wangfei, what do you think? Third Elder could tell that Han Yunshi didn't have the same confidence as before, so he pressed her step by step. It wasn't just Third Elder who was looking at her, but everyone else as well. Gu Beiyue immediately noticed Han Yunshi's strange behavior. Chapter 238. When it came to drawing straws, it was all about luck. Han Yunshi's luck had always been good, but this time, fine. Her slip of paper said first, while Third Elder had written later. She was first. What should she do now? When it rains, it pours. Han Yunshi stared at the slip of paper in her hands, her pale face expressionless. It was impossible to tell what she was thinking. Third Elder's lips curled into a smile as he stared at Han Yunshi's slip of paper. He was very satisfied and purposely backed away from the bed to make room for Han Yunshi. Qin Wangfei, please treat the poison. Will Tianning's Crown Prince recover once the poison is treated? Lady Lianxin asked with a cold smile. She was waiting for Han Yunshi to admit defeat, but Han Yunshi only spat out, nonsense, do you even need to ask? Lady Lianxin gave a start, unable to retort. She could only swallow this loss in silence. As Han Yunshi spoke, she strode to the side of the bed. Third Elder, then this junior won't be polite. Seeing Han Yunshi's stance, Third Elder and Lady Lianxin exchanged disapproving glances. They refused to believe that Han Yunqi could really come up with anything. Please, Third Elder said loudly. Han Yunqi sat down by the bed and looked over Long Tianma from head to toe. By now, the Long Tianma was completely exhausted. He wasn't struggling as fiercely as before, but was gasping at death's door. Third Elder and Lady Lianxin didn't say a word when they saw that Han Yunqi was only looking without making a move. After all, they were superiors and had the patience to do so. Still, they disapproved even more in their hearts. Fourth Elder didn't speak either, but stroked his beard as he watched. As for Luo Zuishan and Shi Yuba, the two of them had ulterior motives and were immersed in their own world. They didn't care about Han Yunqi at all. After all, in their hearts, this little girl couldn't do anything. Gu Beiyue was the closest to Han Yunqi. His hands were clasped behind his back, and his clenched fists betrayed his gentle and quiet face. Han Yunqi's reaction just now made him very worried. He knew what was wrong with this woman. After a while, Han Yunqi was still only looking. Lady Lianxin didn't give her any more time and began to make things difficult. Qin Wangfei, could it be that your eyes can cure poison? Unexpectedly, Han Yunqi still looked at Long Tianma from head to toe and said in a deep voice, okay. This girl was about to die, but she was still so stubborn. All right, then go ahead. Lady Lianxin panted with rage. Han Yunqi didn't even look at her as she nimbly took out a set of golden needles from her medical pouch. With a light wave of her hand, the needle case slowly unfolded on the bed. Needles of various sizes and thicknesses were inserted into the long needle case. Although they were densely packed, they were neat and orderly. There were at least 1,000 needles. Whether one was a professional or not, the first thing to look at was one's appearance. When this set of golden needles was unfolded, everyone present was shocked. Even Gu Beiyue was no exception. Even he had never seen Han Yunqi have such neat golden needles. The absent-minded Shi Yuba and Luo Zuishan also looked over. Although everyone was shocked, they all hid their shock in their hearts. No one showed it, especially Third Elder and Lady Lianxin. Unknowingly, the room became especially quiet. Imperial Physician Gu, I'll have to trouble you to help, Han Yunqi said in a low voice. At this moment, Gu Beiyue's heart suddenly calmed down, just like his calm appearance. He thought, Han Yunqi must be confident. This woman really didn't disappoint. He originally thought that Han Yunqi would have him remove the needles, but who knew that Han Yunqi would say, help me take off all his clothes. Everyone present was a physician, so it was normal for them to ask a patient to take off his clothes. However, Han Yunqi said, take off all his clothes. Does the detoxification need to be like this? Qin Wangfei, you're a woman. Lady Lianxin reminded in disbelief. Han Yunqi was too lazy to pay attention to her. She glanced at Gu Beiyue, hinting for him to hurry up. Gu Beiyue hesitated. This really wasn't appropriate. The 20 major joints and 210 minor joints in his body have all accumulated poison. It needs to be expelled as soon as possible. If I don't take off all his clothes, how can I expel the poison? Han Yunqi seriously asked. Once these words were said, everyone seemed to have tacitly agreed that Long Tianma was poisoned. They looked at each other in dismay. The entire room was silent, and no one refuted. Gu Beiyue understood and didn't bother with etiquette. He hurriedly helped Long Tianma take off his clothes until only his underwear was left. Once his clothes were taken off, Han Yunqi began to work on the major joints, looking for acupuncture points to insert the needles. However, when she picked up the first gold needle, Third Elder couldn't help but say, how can you directly use needles? Third Elder wasn't an ignorant person. He had heard of acupuncture to expel poison and had seen it before. However, not to mention acupuncture to expel poison, even the most common acupuncture treatment would require the gold needle to be cleaned before inserting the needle to prevent infection, right? In ancient times, gold needles were disinfected by boiling. This was the most basic thing that all medical apprentices who had just entered the medical school knew. However, Han Yunxi didn't know. They had just been frightened by Han Yunxi's full set of gold needles. Now, Third Elder and the others regained their senses. In this day and age, there were too many charlatans who used their appearances to scare people. Presumably, Qin Wangfei's gold needles are rare items and don't need to be boiled. Lady Lianxin's face was full of ridicule. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi's tone was even more disdainful than hers. No need. Presumably, this is Fifth Elder's first time seeing this kind of disposable needle, right? What? Disposable needle. Not only was this term unfamiliar to Lady Lianxin, it was also unfamiliar to everyone present. What did this mean? We mainstream Orthodox people naturally don't understand such heretical things. Lady Lianxin hastily retorted. Han Yunxi lowered her head and didn't explain. Instead, she lightly smiled and took out the gold needles to search for the acupuncture points. In the beginning, everyone present could still understand the acupuncture points. However, after a few needles, even Third Elder of the medical saint couldn't understand. He didn't even know the existence of those acupuncture points. As more and more gold needles were inserted, everyone's expressions became more and more complicated. What exactly was Han Yunxi doing? How was this searching for acupuncture points? This was simply randomly inserting needles. If this continued, someone would die. Third Elder couldn't help but remind her, Qin Wangfei, if you randomly insert needles, you will bear the consequences. Only then did Han Yunxi raise her head to look at Third Elder and lightly smile. Amen, I will take responsibility. As she spoke, she took out a long needle and actually closed her eyes, slowly inserting it into Long Tianma's acupuncture point. When this needle went in, the skin around the joint actually slowly seeped out black blood. Black blood, poisonous. Poisonous. Third Elder couldn't help but exclaim. He didn't dare to believe his own eyes. However, everything in front of him was reality. Long Tianma's joint really was poisonous. Not to mention what other illnesses Long Tianma's body had, at least, Han Yunxi wasn't wrong. He was wrong. Long Tianma was poisoned. The pain in his entire body's joints was caused by the poison. The room was terrifyingly silent. Lady Lianxin's face was deathly pale. Everyone else was shocked. Only Gu Beiyue's good-looking lips slowly curled into a smile. In the silence, Han Yunxi had already opened her eyes. Allowing the joint to bleed, she began to treat the second major joint. Very quickly, the second major joint's poisonous blood also slowly seeped out. The entire room became even more silent. Even Long Tianma's last gasps had disappeared. From Third Elder to the junior medical apprentice, everyone unconsciously drew closer. They stared dumbfoundedly at Han Yunxi searching for acupoints to insert needles. Han Yunxi's movements were like moving clouds and flowing water, smooth and elegant. Her white hands moved with an indescribable elegance. Long Tianma's entire body had more than 200 joints. Han Yunxi didn't let go of any of them. Every joint, she earnestly used needles to expel the poison. She did her best to use acupuncture to expel the bone poison. When she reached the last joint, her forehead was already drenched in sweat. Gu Beiyue took out a handkerchief and gently wiped her sweat. Out of professional habit, Han Yunxi didn't refuse. She also wasn't disturbed. She still lowered her head, narrowed her eyes, and earnestly applied the needles. However, a certain person on the roof slowly narrowed his eyes. The coldness in his eyes was terrifying. In the silence, time passed especially quickly. An entire half a day had passed. Long Tianma's body was covered in golden needles, and the poisoned blood had also flowed all over the bed. Finally, after Han Yunxi inserted the last needle, she stopped. At this time, Third Elder was surrounding Han Yunxi. They were all stunned. Han Yunxi twisted her neck and moved her hands. She deliberately glanced at Third Elder. Third Elder immediately avoided her gaze. Seeing this, Han Yunxi was happy. She gently smiled and began to withdraw the needles. The poison that could be expelled from Long Tianma's joints with golden needles was basically all expelled. Han Yunxi's movements were like moving clouds in flowing water. Her movements of withdrawing the needles were even smoother. It was so fast that people couldn't see it clearly. However, even though they couldn't see it clearly, everyone still tried their best to look carefully for fear of missing something. There were more than 200 acupoints. Each acupoint had at least 5 golden needles. One could imagine how many golden needles there were. There should be close to 1,000 needles. She didn't put these golden needles back into the needle case. Instead, she picked them up and threw them to the side. Not long after, she threw away a large pile. Soon, all of the golden needles were removed. Han Yunxi picked up the last golden needle and stood up. She smiled at Lady Lianxin. Ah, this isn't some unorthodox method. Using a needle once means that you don't want it after using it once. Throw it away. As she spoke, she threw the golden needles to the side. Her movements were elegant and confident. An entire set of golden needles, close to 1,000 of them. She actually threw them away just like that. It was simply a reckless waste of God's gifts. Could it be that she had a lot of sets on her hands? Lady Lianxin looked at the pile of golden needles covered in black blood, then looked at Han Yunxi. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Third Elder was still looking at the black blood, and he was even more speechless. Han Yunxi had already walked to the side to wash her hands. She was very serious and focused on washing, as if nothing had happened just now. When she was done, she looked towards Qin Wangrong and said, "Qin Wangrong, I'll have to trouble you to wipe His Highness Crown Prince's body and put on his clothes. I'll come back in 2 days to examine him again." Qin Wangrong was stunned by the sight. Emperor Tianhui had said that this woman was completely useless, but now it looked like that wasn't the case at all. Leaving behind a room full of stunned people, Han Yunxi straightened out her clothes and turned to leave the room. Gu Beiyue followed her out. Once they were out of the courtyard, Gu Beiyue finally spoke up. "Esteemed Wang Fei, just then this one thought there was no cure for this poison." Their argument before had really made him break out in cold sweat. But Han Yunxi stopped with a helpless expression. "It really can't be cured. I'm only expelling the poison first." Hearing this, Gu Beiyue finally gave a start like everyone else. Han Yunxi shrugged her shoulders and kept walking forward. She couldn't cure the poison, nor could she. She'd never admit to something like that. Even if you beat her to death. Fine, she could admit that she'd lost her moral integrity, but she didn't say she'd already cured the poison. That shouldn't count as a lie, right? There were still 2 days left. What should she do? Chapter 239. Princess Consort, you. Gu Beiyue chased after her and was so surprised that he didn't know what to say. "I was also forced to do this." "Who?" Han Yunxi shrugged her shoulders and lowered her head. Seeing her like this, Gu Beiyue found it funny and angry at the same time. He always thought that this woman was omnipotent when it came to poisons. She was always 100% serious and meticulous when it came to patients. But who would have thought that she would act shamelessly? For such an important matter, she had easily fooled the medical school's 2 directors and 3 elders. As a doctor, Gu Beiyue loathed deceiving the world to gain fame and swindling others. But when he saw Han Yunxi's listless appearance, his eyes filled with indulgence and indulgence. In any case, I managed to gain 2 days of time. Han Yunxi lowered her head, but her voice was filled with righteousness. The pampering in Gu Beiyue's eyes became even stronger. He helplessly shook his head and unconsciously reached out his hand, wanting to rub Han Yunxi's head. But his hand stopped in midair. When Han Yunxi raised her head, his hand moved as fast as a shadow and he silently withdrew it. This kind of fast speed was definitely not something an ordinary expert could do. But, not only was his movement fast, it was also silent, making it impossible for anyone to detect him. With his hands behind his back, Gu Beiyue secretly sighed. It was a bit heavy and he couldn't help but feel helpless. This kind of Gu Beiyue was like a completely different person. He lacked his usual calmness and elegance, but had a heavy manly aura. Han Yunxi had no idea what was going on, but Long Fei, who'd been following her the entire time, saw everything clearly. Gu Beiyue, he muttered to himself. His cold eyes followed Gu Beiyue's arm as if he had discovered something. What do you plan to do in these 2 days? Gu Beiyue lightly asked. Do you have a way? If we can't save the crown prince, both of us will die. Han Yunxi asked seriously. Although she was deliberately putting on a show in front of Third Elder and the others, at the same time, she was trying her best to expel as much poison from Long Tianma's joints as possible. Unfortunately, the bone poison could not be expelled completely. He had to apply the antidote to dissolve the remaining poison. Without the antidote, she would definitely be expelled from Medical City in 2 days. However, this was not the most serious consequence. The most serious consequence was that Long Tianma would not live for long. This time, if Long Tianma died in the medical academy, Emperor Tianhui wouldn't do anything to the medical academy. However, she and Gu Beiyue would be condemned to death. Moreover, this would become a perfectly justifiable reason for Emperor Tianhui to punish the Duke of Qin's estate. Gu Beiyue shook his head. No, but, he wanted to say, but we can escape together. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi was too preoccupied to hear the but. She'd only asked him on a whim. She'd long had an idea. Her quick-witted eyes flickered to reveal a sly smile. Han Yunxi scooted closer and lowered her voice. I do. Wait for my good news. I won't implicate anyone else in this matter. For the sake of defeating Third Elder, as well as her and Gu Beiyue's survival, Han Yunxi knew that she had to get the antidote no matter what. Thus, after thinking it over, she decided to use that name, Gu. At a time like this, finding Gu was the wisest choice. Finding a mysterious person with an unknown identity was harder than ascending to the heavens for Han Yunxi, who had no connections at all. Fortunately, there was still one person she could find. That very night, Han Yunxi found a key person, Luo Zuishan. Senior Luo, who had been disdainful of her before, now looked at her with a gaze that was like a searchlight, shining brightly. Qin Wangfei must have something important to visit so late at night, right? Luo Zuishan asked with a chuckle. It's very important. I'll have to trouble Senior Luo with this matter. Han Yunxi responded with a smile. Hearing this, Luo Zuishan was delighted. He remembered the bet between Han Yunxi and Third Elder today. Not only did she have to cure the poison in Long Tianma's body, but she also had to clearly explain the reason for Long Tianma's relapse. He thought that Han Yunxi's late-night visit was probably for the matter of the relapse. Long Tianma's poison was a goo. Even if Han Yunxi had heaven-defying skills, she would never be able to see it. If she wanted to win against Third Elder, she would have to come and beg him. As long as he had something to ask of her, he could take advantage of the situation and ask her about her acupuncture skills. Those unknown acupuncture points and those disposable gold needles were extremely tempting to any doctor. There's no harm in speaking. Luo Zuishan stroked his beard. Although he looked serious, he was secretly delighted. Who knew that Han Yunxi didn't come to ask him about Long Tianma's relapse? Instead, she got straight to the point and asked, "Where's Gu?" Hearing the 3 words, Gu, Luo Zuishan's hand stiffened and he almost pulled out his entire beard. Gu. Han Yunxi came to him to find Gu. When did this girl find out about his relationship with Gu? They'd run into bandits on the way to Medical City. Although it was Gu Qishao who'd saved him, he'd masked his face and kept it hidden. Moreover, Han Yunxi had been kidnapped by the time they turned back, so she wasn't present. Seeing Luo Zuishan's reaction, Han Yunxi knew she had made the right choice. She picked up her teacup and slowly sipped. Gu. Luo Zuishan endured the pain in his jaw and pretended to be a certain person. Qin Wangfei, what did you say, Gu? Imperial Physician Gu. What's wrong with him? Pretending. Even if the kidnapping hadn't happened, just the fact that Gu had patted his chest and promised her that he would be released from prison was enough to prove that he had a deep relationship with Luo Zuishan. It's not Imperial Physician Gu, it's Gu. 7th. Young Master. Han Yunxi deliberately dragged out her words. Gu. This old man has never heard of this person. I wonder, what does Qin Wangfei mean? Luo Zuishan refused to admit it even if he was beaten to death. Han Yunxi was sleepy and didn't have much time to dawdle here. She still chuckled. Senior Luo, I'll have to trouble you to pass on a message to Gu. Just say that I want to see him before dawn, otherwise. Han Yunxi paused here. She didn't have anything she could use to threaten Gu Qishao with, much less tempt him. Otherwise what? After thinking for a moment, Han Yunxi continued domineeringly under Luo Zuishan's incredulous gaze. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences. With that, she got up and left without looking back, leaving Luo Zuishan dumbstruck. Bear the consequences. Just how far had this lass and Gu Qishao progressed? Could it be that she had something on Gu Qishao? That silly boy couldn't have really taken a fancy to this girl, right? He wouldn't have told her all his secrets, right? Thinking of this, Luo Zuishan couldn't care less about pretending. He hurriedly walked out, naturally to search for Gu in the medical academy. As it turned out, Han Yunxi had made the right bet this time. Not long after she returned to her room, Gu appeared in front of her window. Poison lass, bear the consequences. How conceited. He laughed playfully, and anyone could see that he was very happy. Han Yunxi copied him and smiled with narrowed eyes. She hooked her finger, indicating for him to enter the room. Seeing this, Gu was even happier. He was very obedient and jumped in through the window without another word. Those who didn't know the situation would really think that the two of them were having an affair. As soon as Gu came in, Han Yunxi became serious. Sit, I have something to ask of you. If someone were to ask her why she was so sure that Gu would come for no reason, she wouldn't be able to answer. Her intuition told her that he would come. Luo Zuishan naturally told Gu about what happened in the backyard of the consultation hall today. Seeing Han Yunxi's serious expression, he could guess a thing or two. It was rare for him to be so serious, but the words he said were hair-raising. He said, "Since you have something to ask of me, how about you repay me with your body?" Han Yunxi spat out the tea in her mouth and sprayed it all over Gu's face. Scram! She threw this word at him without hesitation. Not only was Gu not angry, he wiped his face and still had a radiant smile on his face. You can owe me first. Think about it. Han Yunxi immediately threw the teacup at him, exploding with anger. Scram! Scram, scram. Seeing that she was so angry that her entire person was unwell, Gu was rarely serious and said gently, all right, all right. Speak. What is it? In that instant, Han Yunxi almost believed that Gu also had a gentle side, but she quickly laughed at her own thoughts. Help me ask Luo Zuishan what's going on with Long Tianma's relapse. Han Yunxi said seriously. Luo Zuishan was so confident in requesting a consultation, so he must have absolute confidence. She wouldn't personally ask Luo Zuishan for help. Letting Gu do it would save a lot of trouble. Gu had a guilty conscience, but he smiled and nodded. Okay. There's another matter. It's very urgent. Han Yunxi continued. This time, Gu was puzzled. What else could this girl have to say? Long Tianma's big belly was because he was poisoned with a gu. His big belly had disappeared, not because he was ill, but because someone had removed the gu. And the poison in Long Tianma's joints had also been removed. Han Yunxi was sure to win against Third Elder. What's the matter? Gu asked curiously. I want to see someone. It's best if I can see him tomorrow. Help me find him. Han Yunxi lowered her voice. Who is it? Gu became more and more curious. Northern Li's Kong Wang, Jun Xie. Han Yunxi answered truthfully. She didn't know that Long Tianma was poisoned with gu, nor did she know that Long Tianma's big belly was gone because the gu had been removed. She only knew that in order to win against Third Elder, she had to solve 3 problems. First, Long Tianma's relapse. Luo Zuishan could help her with this matter. Second, how did Long Tianma's big belly not fall out? This was Jun Xie's masterpiece, so he must know. Third, the antidote for Long Tianma's bone poison. This was also Jun Xie's rhythm. He should have the antidote. If he poisoned someone without the antidote, wouldn't it be the same as murder? Jun Xie shouldn't have the guts to do so. Why are you looking for him? Gu was truly puzzled this time. He's the mastermind behind Northern Li's undercover operation. He's a true poison expert. Han Yunxi answered in a low voice. Hearing this, Gu suddenly narrowed his eyes. A dangerous light flashed through his flirtatious eyes. It's him. In that case, Jun Xie was also a gu expert? This was really beyond his expectations. I want to see him as soon as possible. Han Yunxi said seriously. The dangerous light in Gu's eyes disappeared. He asked jokingly, Northern Li's Kong Wang is your husband's sworn enemy. Does Long Fei Yi know that you want to see him? Chapter 240. When they parted at the inn, Long Fei Yi said that he would always be in Medical City. Han Yunxi admitted that the first person she'd thought of was Long Fei. It was only right and proper to ask him for help, but she quickly rejected the idea. She knew that Long Fei Yi came to Medical City this time for the poison warehouse. Even if he saved her from Jun Xie, he didn't expose his identity. He must be very busy and didn't want to cause more trouble. Moreover, she could deal with Luo Zuishan by asking Gu for help, which was the most suitable choice. It's a secret. Don't tell him. Han Yunxi answered Gu's question in a joking tone. It's much easier for him to find Jun Xie than it is for me. Don't you want to ask him for help? Gu probed. Han Yunxi was still joking. She said with a smile, he'll come whenever you call him. As for him, I don't even know where to find him. Even if he was always in Medical City, she really didn't know where to find him or who to contact. She was always like this, inadvertently discovering that she really knew nothing about that man. Sometimes, even though he was right next to her, she would feel that he was far away. Come whenever you call him. Gu Qishao rubbed his chin as he mulled over the words with interest. Instead of getting angry, he laughed happily. I like what you said. Still, Gu Qishao was quite reliable when it came to Han Yunxi's matters. He used a finger to poke at Han Yunxi's forehead and said seriously, I can help you make an appointment with Junixie, but he's tried to kidnap you time and time again. You actually wanted to deliver yourself to his doorstep, back in the mountain behind the Heavenly Fragrance tea house, Gu and Junixie had fought. He wasn't completely sure that he could protect Han Yunxi. I have my ways to deal with him. You can just come with me. Han Yunxi was serious now. Although meeting Junixie seemed ridiculous and stupid, she could only rely on Junixie to cure the poison in Long Tianmao's body. What is it? Let's hear it. Gu asked curiously. Why? Are you afraid of him too? Han Yunxi asked with a smile. Gu snorted and did not ask any more questions. Wait, I'll give you the news tomorrow morning. Gu said and was about to leave, but just as he reached the door, he turned back and said mysteriously, Poison lass, you were saved by Long Feiyi, right? If the person who kidnapped Han Yunxi was Junixie, then there were only a few people in the world who could save her. Long Feiyi was the first. Han Yunxi nodded. There was no need to hide the kidnapping. Hearing this, the corners of Gu's mouth slowly rose, revealing a pair of charming dimples. Very good, Long Feiyi also came to Medical City. Gu didn't have any special fetishes in his life, but he liked to hold grudges. Long Fei had sealed off his tea houses, as well as that time in Medicine City. He still remembered. If he didn't take revenge now, when would he? Medical City was no longer Long Feiyi's territory. This time, he had to properly repay Long Feiyi. Of course, revenge would have to wait until the matter with Long Tianmao was settled. Then, he would study it carefully. This was probably the first time Gu had left Han Yunxi so happily. He was in a good mood and looked back with a smile at the door. Poison lass, see you tomorrow. Yeah, the door closed. In the dead of night, everything quieted down. Long Fei rested his head on his arms as he reclined on Han Yunxi's roof. He stared at the vast expanse of stars, his eyes as black as midnight growing deeper and deeper, making him more and more unfathomable. That night, he didn't sleep at all. It wasn't until dawn that Tang Li arrived. You're actually here. Tang Li was in disbelief. He had searched for Long Feiyi for an entire day and night. In the end, he didn't know where to find him, so he could only come to Han Yunxi's place to try his luck. They had a lot of things to do in Medical City, but this guy was actually here. How was he always in Medical City? He was always by Han Yunxi's side, alright. Long Feiyi seemed to be in a daze the entire time, but when he saw Tang Li arrive, he quickly gathered his thoughts. Are the people from Medicine City here yet? Only the Mu clan isn't here yet. They'll probably arrive in the next 2 days. I heard the Mu clan's medicine is very important this time, Tang Li replied honestly. Although Medical City's poison sect had been destroyed many years ago, there were still remnants of it left behind. In the poison sect's forbidden grounds was a terrifying poison beast called the Gu Shu. No one had been able to kill it for nearly 100 years. The medical academy could only work with Medicine City to concoct medicine every 5 years and put it to sleep. Rumor had it that this poison beast was the poison sect's most legendary existence. It could distinguish and consume hundreds of poisons, and its blood could cure hundreds of poisons. Most frightening of all, the poison beast itself was highly toxic. Once bitten, it was equivalent to being poisoned by hundreds of poisons. Even an immortal wouldn't be able to save you. The poison sect had been destroyed, but the indestructible poison beast had become the object of everyone's competition. Every time the Gu Shu woke up, all sorts of factions would secretly gather in the peaceful medical city. The Mu clan. Who's delivering the medicine? Long Fei asked again. Mu Ling Tang Li was clearly very excited. That genius pharmacist. Long Fei had heard Tang Li mention this name many times. This gifted little girl was hailed as the most talented pharmacist in Medicine City this year. It was said that she was the best candidate to become the next head of the Mu clan. Of course, Medical City's three great clans weren't just delivering medicine. They also needed to concoct the medicine, brew it, and cooperate with Medical City's people to drug the poison beast. The fact that the Mu clan had sent Mu Ling, this time was enough to prove that she had the ability to take charge of a department on her own. Just wait, there'll definitely be a good show to watch this time. Tang Li was very certain that the Mu clan's medicine was very important this time. This also meant that the Mu clan's pharmacists were going to take on a big responsibility. He was very much looking forward to Mu Ling's performance. Long Fei glanced at him, clearly uninterested. Tang Li thought that he was going to leave, but he didn't move from his seat. You're not leaving. Weren't they planning on exploring the poison sect's forbidden grounds for the next 2 or 3 days? Long Fei shook his head and smiled cold. There's a good show today. Want to watch? Tang Li grew suspicious and looked down. Her. Long Fei didn't speak. He was clearly smiling cold just a moment ago, but now his chiseled face was terrifyingly cold. Tang Li didn't dare ask a second question. Han Yunxi had made a bet with the Council of Elders' third elder that she'd cured Long Tianma's poison yesterday. If everything went smoothly in 2 days, she'd be able to defeat third elder. With Han Yunxi's personality, she wouldn't let third elder off if everything went smoothly. News of this had already spread through the medical academy yesterday afternoon. The real show would have to wait until the examination in 2 days. What kind of show could this woman possibly have? With no other choice, Tang Li could only sit down next to Long Fei and wait with him. He didn't know when he'd started to get used to Long Fei's unplanned waiting. In any case, he could see clearly that Han Yunxi was an existence outside of Long Fei's plans. She was his exception. The sun rose in the east, and the sky was bright. Not long after Han Yunxi woke up, Gu arrived. Did you make the appointment? Han Yunxi asked anxiously. Gu smiled. His mood was as good as the rosy clouds in the eastern sky. He reached out his hand to Han Yunxi. Let's go. Han Yunxi put her hand on his without saying anything. It wasn't that she was casual. Instead, it was because she was magnanimous that she didn't have so many taboos. If it were Long Fei's hand, she would probably hesitate for a moment. On the contrary, Gu paused for a moment. He didn't seem to expect Han Yunxi to be so calm and straightforward. However, he quickly came back to his senses. He held Han Yunxi's hand tightly, put his other hand on her shoulder, and led her over the wall. Gu and Jun Yixia had arranged to meet at a tea house in the west of the city. When they arrived, Jun Yixia hadn't arrived yet. Gu Qishao ordered a table full of pastries and side dishes. There were at least 20 different dishes in total. All of Medical City's specialty pastries are here. Eat slowly, Jun Yixia won't be here so early. Although she wasn't afraid of meeting the person who had kidnapped her again and again, she couldn't help but feel nervous. At this time, Han Yunxi didn't have much of an appetite. However, she casually glanced at the pastries on the table and found that these pastries were more or less the same as the ones Long Fei ordered at the inn that night. You must try these when you come to Medical City. Try these. It said that they're the favorite of you women. Gu attentively put a large plate of pastries on Han Yunxi's plate. Han Yunxi stared blankly. Long Fei, did you prepare all the delicacies on the table that night as well? Seeing Han Yunqi's strange expression, Gu hurriedly asked, "Are you not feeling well?" Han Yunqi didn't answer him and buried her head in the food. Liking someone was so inexplicable that you suddenly missed him so much. Liking someone was so unreasonable that you clearly wanted his company, but you wouldn't ask. Gu was puzzled. He sat down next to Han Yunqi, supported his head with one hand, and tilted his head to look at her. From the first time he met this girl in the cave until now, they were either laughing or pretending to be serious. However, this time, Gu could see that this girl really had something on her mind. "Poison girl, what's wrong?" he asked seriously. Han Yunqi didn't reply, but continued to eat in big bites. "Did someone bully you after I left last night?" Gu didn't realize that he was really anxious. Han Yunqi didn't answer and almost choked on her food. After drinking a few mouthfuls of water, she changed the topic. Dreamy is also in Medical City. She thought that they would have to travel a bit today, but she didn't expect that Dreamy was in Medical City. The kidnapping attempt was unsuccessful. Could it be that this guy was lurking in Medical City and was about to take action? "What's wrong with you?" Gu was serious. Han Yunqi took a piece of pastry and stuffed it into his mouth. No matter how you looked at it, this action was incomparably intimate. However, only Gu knew that Han Yunqi's hand was so strong that he almost choked. "Try it. This green bean sorbet is the best. I like it." Han Yunqi smiled beautifully. Gu tried hard to swallow the food in his throat. Just as he was about to speak, someone knocked on the door. Dreamy, as promised. Chapter 241. Counting carefully, Han Yunqi had been kidnapped by Dreamy 3 times, and each time was extremely dangerous. At this time, this person was at the door. The more Gu looked at Han Yunqi, the more he felt that this woman was bold. He didn't know where she got the courage to ask Dreamy face to face for the antidote. Dong, dong, dong. The knocking on the door was neither fast nor slow, and it was orderly. It could be seen that the person knocking on the door was very calm. "I'll open the door." Gu was about to get up, but Han Yunqi stopped him. "What's the hurry?" "I'll go." Gu shrugged and gestured for her to open the door. Unexpectedly, Han Yunqi didn't open the door immediately. Instead, she slowly chewed and swallowed the pastry in her hand before getting up. Compared to the knocking on the door, Han Yunqi's rhythm was more calm and unhurried. Gu couldn't help but shake his head. The smile on the corner of his mouth revealed endless doting. Han Yunqi didn't hesitate and directly opened the door. Although she was fully prepared, the person outside the door still made her suck in a breath of cold air. She guessed that Dreamy would come alone, but she didn't expect that he would show his real face. This domineering face exuded the aura of a wild king. Han Yunqi had only caught a glimpse of it before, but she would never forget it. Last time, she didn't see wrong. There was a blood-red eyebrow nail embedded in the corner of his right eyebrow. Under the cover of his fine bangs, she couldn't see what kind of totem it was. It was mysterious and full of wildness. At this time, the two stood facing each other with only a threshold between them. Other than facing Long Fei Yi, this was the first time Han Yunqi felt such a strong aura. Dreamy looked at Han Yunqi from head to toe. He was extremely presumptuous and did not try to hide anything. Han Yunqi did not back down and bravely looked back at him. After a few inadvertent eye contact, Dreamy's gaze became even more domineering and invasive. Han Yunqi's eyes were bright and clear as she returned his gaze. She did not know that her aura at this moment was actually not weaker than the man in front of her. The two of them were silent, and the whole world seemed to have quieted down. The atmosphere was tense. Behind Han Yunxi, Gu had already grasped the hilt of his sword. Danger was imminent. However, Han Yunxi suddenly smiled. "It is my honor to have Your Highness Duke Kong grace me with his presence. It is my honor to receive Qin Wangfei's invitation," Jun Yixia quickly responded. Even when he smiled, he looked like a demon, without any hint of a smile. "Please." Han Yunxi was natural and unrestrained, and her smile was especially beautiful. She had calculated that when she took the initiative to invite him, Jun Yixia was still a man and the dignified Duke of Northernly. He still had some magnanimity. He would not refuse the invitation, nor would he take the opportunity to kidnap her. Jun Yixia strode in and glanced at Gu from the corner of his eyes. He did not take him seriously. Even though he was here, he still wanted to kidnap Han Yunxi. This woman was really too useful to him. However, he would not do that. This woman dared to disregard former enmity and take the initiative to invite him. If he did not have the magnanimity to take the opportunity to kidnap her, wouldn't he be worse than a woman? "Your Highness Duke Kong, I think you also know why I invited you." Han Yunxi went straight to the point. Long Tianma's life was in danger, and there were only 2 days left until the bet. She did not have much time to waste here. Jun Yixia had poisoned Long Tianma and sent him back to Medical City. Wasn't he the one who wanted to make things difficult for her? Unexpectedly, Jun Yixia was not happy at all. He sat down at the tea table and leisurely brewed tea. This duke does not know. He had always been straightforward and did not like to dawdle. However, this time, he was facing Han Yunxi. It was rare for him to have the patience to slowly chat. Han Yunxi hated this kind of pretense the most. Seeing that Jun Yixia was leisurely pouring tea, she pressed down on the teacup and said very directly, "Duke Kong, the poison in Long Tianma's body is concentrated in the joints of his body. This poison was cultivated in Medicine City's poison pool, correct?" As soon as she said this, a trace of surprise flashed through Jun Yixia's eyes. He knew of Han Yunxi's abilities. It was normal for this woman to be able to find out that Long Tianma's poison was concentrated in his joints. However, how could she be so sure that the poison was cultivated in Medicine City's poison pool? Although he was surprised, Jun Yixia was determined to waste time here with Han Yunxi. He frowned slightly. "Qin Wangfei, this duke does not understand what you are saying." "Does not understand." Han Yunxi hated this kind of meaningless hypocrisy. Wasn't it boring? She slowly narrowed her eyes and directly threw out a heavy bomb. "Your Highness Duke Kong, what do you think of exchanging Long Tianma's life for a bottle of poison pool water?" As soon as these words came out, Jun Yixia could not hold back at all. He abruptly raised his eyes to look at her, a sharp light shooting out from his eyes. It was clear that he was shocked. But speaking of which, anyone who knew about the poison pool in Medicine City's medicine forest would be shocked to hear Han Yunxi's words. It had to be known that even now, the 3 great clans of Medicine City still did not understand how such a large pool of poison water had disappeared. That night, although Jun Yixia was injured and left first, the Mu clan was still present. That large pool of poison water had indeed disappeared into thin air. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi did not have the chance to touch the poison pool. How could this woman have poison pool water? The value of poison pool water lay in the fact that it could be used to cultivate new poisonous creatures. The reason why Jun Yixia was able to cultivate the 100-leaf purple jade grass was because he had a small cup of poison pool water on hand. How much poison water did this woman have on hand? Han Yunxi, the disappearance of Medicine City's poison pool, is related to you? Jun Yixia probed. Something that disappeared into thin air. Your Highness Duke Kong must not slander me. Medicine City is not something I can afford to offend, Han Yunxi replied seriously. How could you have poison pool water? Jun Yixia pressed. Your Highness Duke Kong was able to cultivate that poison, so you must also have poison pool water. In that case, the disappearance of the poison pool water is also related to you. Han Yunxi blinked her eyes and asked seriously. That innocent expression of hers was enough to make one anxious to death. Gu, who had been listening from the side, couldn't help but rub his chin. Medicine City's poison pool water. So this woman had such a valuable bargaining chip in her hands. No wonder she had the confidence to meet with Zhu Nixia. Originally, Han Yunxi had a request to make of Zhu Nixia, but now it seemed that Zhu Nixia had a request to make of Han Yunxi. Zhu Nixia was rendered speechless by Han Yunxi's rhetorical question. He finally stopped beating around the bush and asked seriously, "How can I be sure that you really have poison pool water in your hands?" As soon as she heard this, Han Yunxi knew that Zhu Nixia was moved. There was hope in this deal. This time, Han Yunxi was no longer anxious with Zhu Nixia. She sat back down and imitated Zhu Nixia's earlier demeanor, calmly pouring tea. After finishing the cup of tea, she took out a poison pill from her sleeve and tossed it to Zhu Nixia. "I cultivated this. I call it bone poison." As soon as Zhu Nixia caught the bone poison, he was certain that it was the 100-leaf purple jade grass that he had cultivated. Its composition and toxicity were exactly the same, only its appearance was different. Without poison pool water and those specific medicinal herbs, it was absolutely impossible to cultivate this type of poison. Han Yunxi definitely had poison pool water in her hands, as well as the medicinal herbs that he had spent great effort to collect. No matter how this woman got her hands on those things, she had them. Tianning's crown prince's life isn't only worth a single bottle of poison, is it? Zhu Nixia laughed coldly. Han Yunxi wasn't planning to back down. Her expression was helpless. I only have one bottle on hand. I can only inconvenience His Highness Crown Prince by lowering his status." These words were simply meant to confuse the public. Zhu Nixia had no way to tell the truth, much less guess how Han Yunxi had gotten her hands on the poison pool water. Of course, Zhu Nixia wasn't someone easy to deal with. Despite the chaos in his heart, his expression was as steady as empty tie. How could the stately heir apparent of Tianning lower his status? The prestige of Tianning's imperial clan is much more valuable than a person's life. Zhu Nixia was right. Long Tianma's tragedy was that his title as crown prince was more important than his life. Being bedridden for so long had cost him half of his youth and half of his chances. Now that he'd recovered, he'd become Emperor Tianhui's chess piece. Han Yunxi's thoughts wandered. She couldn't imagine how Long Tianma would treat his father and ruler, Emperor Tianhui, after he recovered from his illness. "In other words, we can't make a deal," Gu interjected. Zhu Nixia glanced at him without replying, but rose to his feet with the intention of leaving. No matter how precious the poison pond water was, a single bottle wasn't worth Long Tianma's life. In this situation, it was time for Han Yunxi to increase her bargaining chip, but she actually rose to her feet with a smile. "How regretful, Your Highness Duke of Kong. If there's a chance, we'll meet again next time." Zhu Nixia's heart gave a start, but he refused to believe that Han Yunxi would give up just like that. If she couldn't save Zhu Nixia, she'd be in big trouble. "See you again." Zhu Nixia cupped his fists and bowed before turning to leave. Seeing this, Han Yunxi remained unmoved, as steady as Mount Tai. Gu leaned on one side, stroking his chin as he silently counted Zhu Nixia's footsteps. Zhu Nixia reached the door, his lips quirked up into a cold, sinister smile. He stopped and said icily, "Qin Wangfei, your lordship has brought the antidote. Where's the poison pool water?" "One thing for one thing. Where's the antidote?" Han Yunxi kept her guard up, unwilling to suffer any losses. Dreamy finally turned around and took out an antidote pill from his sleeve. At the same time, Han Yunxi took out a bottle of poison pool water as well. Seeing this, Gu quickly murmured, "Wait, let's get him half of it first to see if it's real or fake before exchanging." However, Han Yunxi didn't seem to hear him. She stared at the antidote in Dreamy hand, her brows slightly furrowed as she concentrated on it. "Qin Wangfei, can we exchange now?" Dreamy held the antidote and walked over step by step. Han Yunxi suddenly retreated and shouted angrily, "Dreamy, your antidote is fake. That's the antidote for the 1,000 osmanthus grass. You're shameless." With these words, Dreamy stopped in his tracks. He was once again shocked by Han Yunxi. He hadn't concocted the antidote yet, so the pill in his hand was obviously fake. However, Han Yunxi was watching from afar, so how did she know? She could actually accurately identify the antidote for the poison. This woman was too scary. Gu was also shocked by Han Yunxi's ability. However, he quickly regained his senses and stepped forward to protect Han Yunxi behind him, distancing herself from Dreamy. "Kong Wang, are you still a man for deceiving a woman like this?" Gu mocked disdainfully. Dreamy's face alternated between red and white. However, he quickly ignored the last trace of awkwardness in his heart and coldly said, "Han Yunxi, tell this prince where this poison pond water came from. This time, this prince won't make things difficult for you." "Where's the antidote?" Han Yunxi angrily asked. This was the question she was most concerned about. The reason she had no choice but to take this risk was also for the sake of the antidote. However, Dreamy gave her a despairing answer, "The antidote hasn't appeared yet. This prince wants Long Tianma to die in Medical City." Note to the readers, recently, I haven't been able to stabilize the update time. Everyone, come to see the update at 9 p.m. This is the latest time. Welcome to Ad Momo's public WeChat account, Gmomo 2015. Reply, Gu, to see the text and explanation. Chapter 242. Dreamy, you're going against the rules of using poisons. Aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by your peers? Han Yunxi rebuked angrily. There was an unwritten rule in the poison world that one should never use poisons without an antidote unless absolutely necessary. Han Yunxi, rather than worrying about my reputation, why don't you worry about your own life? Dreamy was especially disdainful of his so-called peers. He held one of the top positions in Cloud Realm Continent's poison world and never followed any rules. In a field, strength was everything. With strength, one could set the rules. Seeing Dreamy's disdainful smile, Han Yunxi only felt hatred. She glared viciously at Dreamy, wishing she could kill him with her gaze. She really had overestimated this fellow's character. What was she supposed to do now? 2 days later, losing to Third Elder and being expelled from Medical City wasn't a big deal, but Long Tianma's death, thinking up to here, Han Yunxi's glare at Dreamy grew colder and colder. She was so angry that her entire body began to emit a terrifying killing intent. Even Gu could sense the change in her aura. But Dreamy seemed to like Han Yunxi's angry look very much. His smile grew even more savage as he said, "Han Yunxi, leave the poison pond water behind. This time, your lordship won't make things difficult for you." He even dared to ask for her poison pond water. Han Yunxi laughed out loud. "You call this not making things difficult? Then what's considered making things difficult? I finally understand why you're wearing a mask. Hee, you're just shameless." At these words, Dreamy's face turned 3 shades redder. "You!" He was more shocked than angry, more embarrassed than shocked. He'd never been insulted like this in his life, much less by a woman. What about me? I thought I overestimated your character, but it looks like you have no character at all. Let me tell you, don't even think about getting a single drop of the poison pond water. Han Yunqi shouted angrily. Jun Yixie's face was flushed red. No one knew if it was due to guilt or anger. Either way, he stood there, seemingly caught off guard and at a loss of what to do. The dignified Kong Wang of Northern Li, the high and mighty leader of the 100 Poisons sect, was actually scolded by Han Yunqi like this. It was really hard to imagine. Gu widened his eyes and watched from the side. He thought that this woman must be mad. Under such circumstances, it would not do them any good to provoke Jun Yixie too much. At this time, Tang Li, who was watching the show from the rooftop, was laughing so hard that he almost had a stroke. Long Fei Yi, this is really a good show. Jun Yixie would definitely kill her. Ha ha ha. Stupid woman. Long Fei Yi's face was as gloomy as the sky before a storm. It seemed like no good show would be able to please him. Tang Li was laughing, but he did not miss the thing in Han Yunqi's hand. He asked suspiciously, "Hey, how did she get the poison pond water?" This was also what Long Fei Yi did not understand. On the night the poison pond water disappeared, he was present. Han Yunqi fainted in his arms, so that woman did not have the chance to come into contact with the poison pond water. At this time, Jun Yixie had already recovered from Han Yunqi's scolding. He ignored the hesitation in his heart and with a cold face, he walked towards Han Yunqi step by step. Han Yunqi, you don't have the qualifications to be impudent in front of this prince. Hand over the poison pond water, otherwise don't blame this prince for being impolite. Gu was protecting Han Yunqi, but who knew that Han Yunqi would suddenly push him away with one hand and raise the poison pond water up high with the other. She stood up and faced Jun Yixie, coldly snorting, "You want this thing, right? I won't give it to you." The moment her voice fell, she fiercely threw the poison pond water in her hand onto the ground. No one expected Han Yunqi to do this. This woman was so fierce. "You dare!" Jun Yixie was the first to react. He did not even think as he leaned forward to protect the poison pond water. Who knew that at this moment, Han Yunqi would suddenly raise her hand and fiercely shoot out several poison needles, striking first to gain the initiative. Unfortunately, the strength and speed of the torrential pear blossom tears was just a small trick in front of an expert like Jun Yixie. Even if Jun Yixie was wholeheartedly protecting the poison pond water, he still easily dodged it. Jun Yixie pressed one hand on the ground and the other hand held onto the poison pond water. Almost at the same time, all the poison needles that Han Yunqi shot out fell to the ground beside him. At this moment, Jun Yixie suddenly raised his head and his eyes were as fierce as the king of hell, cold as he looked at Han Yunqi. This woman had already crossed his bottom line. Today, he would not take her away, but he would definitely make her pay the price. Han Yunqi, this prince has already said that you don't have the qualifications to be impudent in front of this prince. After Jun Yixie's cold voice, he fiercely slapped the ground with his hand, causing all the poison needles in the surroundings to shoot back at Han Yunqi at lightning speed. His speed was so fast that it was hard to deal with. Careful! In the nick of time, Gu Qishao wrapped an arm around Han Yunqi's waist and pulled her into his embrace. With a turn of his body, his scarlet robes billowed in the air, creating a gust of wind that knocked the poison needles flying towards them to the ground. Jun Yixie, this is the first time this young master has seen you make a move against a woman, hee. Gu's lips curled into a mocking smile. She asked for it. Jun Yixie was currently in a rage, so how could he care about whether he was a gentleman or not? You're a man, so be a bit gentlemanly and give in to her. Gu was still smiling. It looked like he was joking, but it was actually a mocking smile. As he spoke, he pulled Han Yunxi back and glanced at the window to the side. If they couldn't win, then the best strategy was to run. Gu, you invited this prince out, so it's not that easy to break up. Zhu Nixie saw through Gu's intentions at a glance. He casually put the poison pond water into his sleeve and approached in a flash. Gu immediately dodged, but at this time, Han Yunxi was well behaved. She nestled in Gu's embrace and silently looked at Zhu Nixie's sleeve, as if waiting for something. Zhu Nixie chased after him while Gu Qishao dodged. Although Gu Qishao's overall strength wasn't inferior to Zhu Nixie's, he wasn't weak either. Without a direct confrontation, it was easy for him to protect Han Yunxi while dodging and dodging. As he dodged, he teased Zhu Nixie with a few words. Of course, during this chase, Zhu Nixie had already used poison several times, and Gu had also neutralized it several times. During the entire process, Han Yunxi was unusually quiet, so quiet that she was almost ignored. Suddenly, Zhu Nixie stopped abruptly, one hand on his sword. Seeing this, Gu's eyes darkened and he became alert. Zhu Nixie did not speak any more nonsense. Gu also didn't know that it was useless to say anything at this time. The room became especially quiet, and the air was filled with tension. But who knew that in this silence, Zhu Nixie, who was about to draw his sword, suddenly groaned. His right hand dropped and his sword fell to the ground with a clang. Before anyone could understand what had happened, Zhu Nixie immediately took out the bottle of poison pond water from his sleeve. Poison. The poison pond water had been tampered with and his hand was poisoned. What a treacherous Han Yunxi. It turned out that her provocative insults weren't because she was stupid or arrogant, but because she had a motive. Zhu Nixie, one of the top poisons experts of the poison world, had once again fallen to this woman's hands and been poisoned. His right hand suddenly lost all strength. His wrist, elbow, and all three joints were in pain. It was similar to the 100 Leaves Purple Jade, but it wasn't completely the same. Damn it, he couldn't determine what kind of poison it was and whether the poison would spread to other parts of his body. Han Yunxi, you're despicable. Zhu Nixie clenched the bottle of poison pond water and was about to throw it at Han Yunxi. But who knew that before it left his hand, the porcelain bottle suddenly exploded with a bang, spraying out a poisonous mist. This was Han Yunxi's real motive. Who would have thought that she still had this trick up her sleeve? Zhu Nixie didn't even have time to throw the porcelain bottle away and the poisonous mist sprayed onto his face. Damn it, it was another poison that he couldn't identify immediately. Zhu Nixie could only dodge and disperse the poisonous mist. Zhu Nixie, this princess consort dared to come see you, not because she believes in you, but because she believes in herself. This time, this princess consort will kidnap you. The current Han Yunxi was the same as before, confident and calm. However, there was an additional charm that no one could ignore, as if she was the focus of the entire world. Gu, what are you in a daze for? Why aren't you making a move? She said in a low voice. Before Gu could move, Zhu Nixie blew a whistle and 20 over black-robed poison men suddenly flew in from the surrounding windows, surrounding him tightly. Following that, another 20 over black-robed poison men rushed in and attacked Gu together. In the midst of the chaos, Zhu Nixie was the first to jump out of the window. No one noticed that just as Zhu Nixie was about to jump out of the window, a white figure appeared out of thin air and a pair of blossom rain needles viciously pierced into Zhu Nixie's shoulder. Following that, a kick came, kicking him down from high up in the air. Fuck. Who is he guarding against? He brought so many people here. Gu cursed. How would he be able to chase after them? He thought that it would be better for him to escape as soon as possible. Although he could deal with this batch of black-robed poison men, but with Han Yunxi protecting him, he didn't dare to take the risk. Han Yunxi had not expected that there would be so many black-robed poison men lying in ambush around them. This time, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to capture Junie Xia. However, just as she was about to give up, she suddenly felt a strong gust of wind blowing by her side. Before she could figure out what was going on, she was pulled out from Gu's embrace and she crashed into another chest. "Kill everyone here without mercy." A cold voice sounded from above. Han Yunxi raised her head and immediately saw a clean and good-looking jaw with strong lines. Even the way this man spoke was so good-looking. It was him, Long Fei Yi. Tang Li had gone to chase after Junie Xia, and other than Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi, other than Junie Xia's poison men, there was only Gu. What did Long Fei Yi mean by saying, "Kill everyone without mercy"? One by one, guards wielding Tang clan's hidden weapons appeared. There were at least 50 of them, and in an instant, the private box was completely surrounded, their momentum completely suppressing the 2 batches of poison men. With more people, the fight became even more intense and Gu's figure was completely drowned out by the black mass of people. In the midst of the chaos, Long Fei Yi's footsteps were still calm and composed. One of his hands was wrapped tightly around Han Yunxi's waist, his expression cold and stern as he walked step by step out from the chaos. At that moment, Han Yunxi's entire body had stiffened. How could she have thought that he would come? You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.